Mr. City.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everybody. I really don't have anything for this particular item. So.
Okay, does anybody else? I know Ray will not be here tonight. And Mr. Bond, we have online. Can you hear us? Michael, okay?
Yes, I sure can.
Okay, good. All right, anybody have anything from last week? Okay, let's move on then. Platte River Trails, we're going to meet the new director apparently.
Yes, sir. Many of you are aware that Miss Angela here is leaving us, which we are all regretful for, but where one door closes, another one opens. And so we have the opportunity to meet the new executive director, Ms. Spear. And so do you want to stand up and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Rachel Spear. Thanks for having us here tonight, and I'm excited to work with you guys. I appreciate the past partnership and look forward to a great future together, keeping Casper great, making it even better.
And where did you come from?
I was doing freelance marketing and contract work. Prior to that, I was the director of development for the Child Development Center. Prior to that, more freelance contract work. So.
Excellent. Well, welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Very good. We thank you for letting me put you on the spot. I appreciate that. Mr. Mayor, if it's okay, maybe we can jump right into the next item.
Let's do it. Ednis Kimball Wilkins easement.
Yes, sir. This is the opportunity that we have to pursue some easement access, if you will, from the state in order to continue our work with regard to connecting to Ednis Kimball Wilkins State Park via pathway, if you will. And so as it relates to requesting that particular easement and so forth, there are a couple things we hope that you would recognize and understand about this project. And for that, I could either turn it over to you, Mr. Beamer, or to the Trails Trust, who would ever like to take it on.
I can do that.
All right. That's okay, Mr. Mayor.
Anything to get you out of it, huh, Andrew? I'm sure you worked it out beforehand. Welcome.
Thank you. My name's Eric.
Would you mind going up there?
Up there?
Yeah.
Oh, so back there?
Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Eric Easton. I'm executive on the executive board for the Platte River Trails Trust. I've been on there 20-some years, something like that, almost as long as Angela. One of the things we're trying to accomplish is to have a trail from one end of Casper to the other, west end to the east end. East end, obviously, is going to be a continuation of the trail on the railroad, the old railroad right-of-way that was donated to the city some years ago, and I think it's mentioned in your memo as well. So the Trails Trust, in our capacity, is trying to help facilitate building trails, kind of figuring out how to make adjustments, how to make connections between different areas. Have looked at that east end and trying to figure out how we get to Ednis Kimball Wilkins Park. The railroad trail, the pathway, goes through state land. It's right now leased to the Ednis Kimball Wilkins Ranch Partnership. But we have the ability to go in and ask for an easement to connect the existing railroad right-of-way to Ednis Kimball Wilkins Park. If you look at the trail studies, obviously there was a pretty extensive review done, 3 different options on ways to get to the trail, or get from the trail to the park. The third option, the ones that looks most appealing to us in terms of being able to make a connection between the railroad trail and the park with an access that does not create a public problems with having trail users cross a busy 70-mile-an-hour highway. And we'll do that by creating a bypass path bridge over the right-of-way cut, so it saves some costs hopefully, and then connect that with the rail trail. What we need to do in order to accomplish that is to, in addition to getting funding for the bridge itself, is to have an easement between the rail trail and the right-of-way, the highway right-of-way. So what we're proposing is a 300-foot trail, which is not very far, 30 feet wide, but we need to apply to the state lands and investment to do that. What we'd like to do is ask your permission to apply for that on your behalf. It would be owned by the city. We'd be happy to do the paperwork, to get the easements done, get the surveys completed, provide the paperwork, work with state lands and talking to the landowner to see if there's any remediation we need to do or accommodation to the landowners. I shouldn't say landowners, the leaseholders. Interest in that area. But again, it's our intent to ask you for permission to go ahead and make that application. Obviously, we would work with the engineer's office, with the city attorney's office, with Zoom at Parks and Rec, to accomplish that and make sure we're all accomplishing on the same track to accomplish that. But the Parkway Trails, would like to take that opportunity to move forward and make that application to state lands and kind of go ahead with that process. So if there's any questions I can ask or answer for you, I guess I can't ask questions. Any questions I can answer for you, I'd be happy to do that.
Anyone? Sir.
Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind. So, Eric, it sounds like then this application will be made on behalf of the city with regard to your efforts and work.
Correct.
Okay.
We think the ownership should remain with the city. I mean, the rail trail itself is with the city. Makes sense that the connection, the easement be with the city. The other thing that happens is we create a permanent easement because the city is a perpetual entity, has perpetual life. So we don't have to go back every few years and redo a license if we had applied directly as the Parkway Trails. Costs are a little different, a little cheaper to actually do an easement. I think the state's more used to doing easements with municipal entities than we are with private groups. I don't know that the state lands has done other pathways, but I think it's a little bit out of their typical operating procedures. So if we say it's going to be an easement owned by the city, then I think it's a little more straightforward.
Just for transparency's sake for the public, how much money are you asking for to apply for? And do you have the appropriate funding to match?
I don't think we're asking for any money at this point at all. We'll do the application fees and the cost for the surveys and that kind of background information.
What I'm asking for is how much money are you applying for? None?
None at this point. We're just asking for the easement itself.
Oh, gotcha.
And then the next step would be to work with the highway department for TEAL grants to do the bridge, the connections if we improve the trail. So yeah, no money at this point.
I did read your I read up on it and I noticed there were some complaints about some of the current shape of the current trail system.
Sure.
Lack of benches, things like that. Are those things that you folks are addressing at some point? Or
Certainly are trying to, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a hard thing to balance, moving forward as you can to expand it either direction to keep prepare maintenance on what you currently have. As I don't need to tell you, I don't think
you could certainly understand our situation with our streets.
Actually, we have no
sir.
idea what streets and pipelines and sewers.
Yeah, we get it for sure. So do we need some form of direction from us, Mr. Manager, or?
I think, Mr. Mayor, if council is comfortable with the trust acting in the behalf of the city as was described, a thumbs ought to do it.
And we will have someone that's kind of guiding them through it and keeping an eye on it, I'm assuming, since it's our.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Actually, Andrew and Alex and Zulima are all kind of weighing in on this and being a part of the process as well.
Is everybody good to go with that? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Much easier than you probably thought, I suppose.
I didn't know what to expect. Guess we'll go ahead and sit down. Thank you.
Well, they're checking us at the gate, so we didn't have stones to throw.
Nice to meet you, Rachel. Thanks very much.
Chief likes that corner. I think he's a gunslinger.
I just like to see everything.
I understand. Okay, now we're going to get into some meat and potatoes, it looks like, Mr. City Manager.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, Mr. Mayor.
Capital budget review.
Councilors, this is the opportunity that you have to guide and direct a major portion of the upcoming budget in the form of discussing capital and the projects and so forth associated with the capital agenda. As you probably noted, we are talking about a $45 million program over the next year. And we are fortunate that we've identified a number of sources that help us get to that $45 million because, as you probably recall, we don't bring capital agenda proposals to you unless we have the money on hand or we've got grant commitments that we're pursuing. And so in all these cases, it's one or the other, money on hand or grant opportunities that we're trying to get. Now, undoubtedly, you probably also noticed another item on our agenda tonight that talks about some of the fine tuning we need to do with from a policy approach as it relates to some of the more aggressive efforts we're trying to undertake for other money to get more projects done in the community that are needed. We'll cover that here in a little bit. But as it relates to capital, this is your opportunity to ask questions, dig into some of the projects if you care to, and make sure we are acting in the direction that you would see appropriate for this major portion of the budget that hopefully we'll get to adopt here in mid-June, which seems like it's far away, but we're really not that far away. This is in fact one of the first major steps that you'll help us with here. Pursuant to the list of projects that we have here, you'll notice that there's a number of projects throughout the organization. All of our departments mostly are represented, and of course there's some much bigger ones than others, as you probably noticed. What I would prefer to do, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay with you, is either take it from the summary that we presented to you tonight. We've got some stuff we can put up on the screen as well that gives you a lot more detail. Also, as you remember, Pete's kind of our point on this effort each year, and he's got some data we can go through also. We've got a number of department heads here tonight that can walk you through a lot of the detail, particularly for some of the larger, probably more invasive projects that we have on the schedule. We got a number of ways we can go tonight, Mr. Mayor.
I think that would be a great way to go, and I would urge the council to keep in mind when we're asking questions to try to keep the financial questions to a minimum if possible. A lot of this stuff is going to have to go out for bid, and I don't know that we want people knowing how much is allocated towards those bids, because then it becomes rather unfair to the city as far as getting fairness in our bidding process, if that makes sense to you. In other words, let's say we're going to redo City Hall and we set aside $20 million. Well, if somebody knows that and they were going to bid it at 3.5, but they know we've set aside 20, we're not going to get the fairness in the bids that we're going to need in order to stretch our municipal dollars as far as we can. So with that in mind, sir, if you would like to key it up.
Absolutely. Maybe I could get Pete to draw up the chart here and orient us a little bit on the charts, the worksheets you put together. And if it pleases the council, I'd like to turn some time over to each of the departments to go through just a few of their more headliner type projects. That's all right. So we'll start with Pete, then we'll work our way around.
Sure.
Okie doke.
So just as a way to orient, and of course we can go every way you guys would like, but well, first of all, I guess, yes, my name is Pete. Nice to meet you all.
For the very first time.
This is
AKA Aikido Pete.
I wish that you'd never said that.
you know, it's I've had worse nicknames. Talking about high school. But,
It's complimentary, by the way.
indeed it is.
Thank you.
So maybe if we could go to like the next page, or maybe I need to borrow your mouse. So, of course, you guys have seen this document. This was in your packet. And so we've got links to a few key reports that are in here as a way to sort of get a global sense for what is in the capital budget, the proposed capital budget for this year. This, which tries to break it out by department. You've got this in your packet. You've also got this, which tries to break it out by where the money is coming from, different kinds of money, and certainly assembling the capital budget is always a question of where's the money at, where's it coming from. And certainly we rely very heavily on the 1 cent, we rely very heavily on both 1 cent 16 and 1 cent 17. And this year we're expecting to pull money from various other sources as well, including some money from CARES and ARPA that we've collected already, and of course a dozen other sources. But beyond that, we also have a 5-year capital plan, which tries to sketch out where things are going to go for the next 5 years. Now, of course, it's always very hard to predict exactly how much we're going to have or can afford for different projects, and this is always a moving target. And inevitably, it comes out that
projects sometimes come in under budget or over budget, as the case may be, and so we have to end up borrowing money from one project to another, or just canceling projects, as the case may be, once the rubber hits the road, once the bids actually come in. But that being said, certainly you're aware from your packet of certain major projects which are out there. We can summarize those if you'd like. Certainly one thing we're trying to get done is the police station this year. That's a major project. We're trying to get a number of street projects done throughout the year. We are trying to build a supplemental building for the water garage. We are trying to put a new roof on fire station number 3. We're trying to buy a lot of equipment for solid waste, especially just to keep that operation running. These are the expenses that we have to go through in order to keep the operation going. And certainly we have lots of information available for you. It's always the challenge is to present the global picture at the big picture level and also be able to present to you the details so that you can see specifically, all right, project XYZ, we're replacing this particular mower. Why? So we've got that for you if you want to drill at that level, but also we've got it for you at the larger level if that's easiest.
So, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay, maybe we can rotate around the room with respect to the, like I said, the headliner projects. I would suggest, Mr. Mayor, if there are projects, however, that you're aware are associated with these departments, please don't hesitate to ask questions and get to a level of comfort with what it is we're proposing. Unless did I cut you off, Pete, or did you cover what you need to?
Okay. Absolutely done. Thank you, sir.
Okay, all right. One of the things that we do, Mr. Mayor and councilors, as we prepare for this conversation, the department heads and myself and Pete and Jill's team all sit down and look at all the projects that they have at stake. The unfortunate thing every year that occurs is we don't get to fund every project that is needed. And I do emphasize the word needed because indeed there are, it's very rare that we bring forward projects that are just niceties or whatever. And you're going to see that recurring theme here in a little bit. For the police chief, and we'll just start with Chief McFeeters, his biggest concerns you'll see is cars. Trying to keep up with that one-to-one program. We're kind of on that bubble of the original purchase of that original set of vehicles. And so if I could, Mr. Mayor, turn the time over to the chief, I'd appreciate that.
Mayor, Council, Carter just adequately stated everything he said. Yeah, I'm concerned about it. We have so of our current existing fleet, 42 of those vehicles, I believe, Dan, are still the original 2013 vehicles. They continue to have aging problems. For example, we've had to pull out almost all of them, the wiring harnesses for the headlights. They just have been melting, and that's the kind of symptoms that we're having of just keeping those vehicles on the road and still active. And many of you will see as they're driving down the road, cosmetically they're also past their prime. They no longer look professional. That's not our concern. The concern is their viability. Out of the current capital project that is before you today it contains the residue of our monies from the 1 cent 16. So we're picking up some vehicles from that. Moving into the 1 cent 17 budget for this coming fiscal year, there's only going to be enough money on hand from those revenues to provide for 4 police vehicles. So in our request today is a modicum amount of vehicle replacements. So most of those are marked vehicles. There's one unmarked vehicle and then one animal control vehicle. In conjunction with a citywide organizational attempt to get disparate treatment or disparate funding out of the Dino Solar project. We did negotiate for one additional vehicle the expenses for that will be generated hopefully by that Dino Solar project. So a very limited purchase of vehicles is before you, most of which are taken out of the 1 cent 16 monies. are previously set aside. And then with 1 cent 17, this being the short year of that, there's only enough room for 4 vehicles in that. So that, we'll take every vehicle we can get. Frankly, our attrition rate now on totaled vehicles that are damaged in crashes and made unusable is not we're losing those faster than the vehicles that Dan is identifying as, hey, we just can't keep this vehicle limping along anymore. And so, the police department is going to continue to have a stressful time just keeping the fleet operational and in a safe condition. We're going to be dealing with this in the upcoming budget years, so I appreciate council's patience as annually there will be discussion of we've still got to address some of these concerns. So, Mr. City Manager, that was just a down and dirty thing. Was there anything else you wanted me to highlight on that?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Sure.
Can you give us a real quick primer with regard to where we are with the building project?
The Casper Business Center, Mayor, Council, the Casper Business Center is progressing along. We are kind of in that third iteration of the floor plan drawings of trying to fit everything into that building in such a way that it's efficiently, the operational efficiency is maintained. We've been studiously trying to not invade one entire floor to cut down on the initial renovation costs of the Casper Business Center. And so we're finalizing the floor plans so that we can present it to council and say, is this what you had in mind? And I believe that's coming sometime within in the next few weeks. So upon completion of that and approval from council, we would be at the position to start preparing to put that out for, getting a better feel for what the expenses are going to be through the RFP process.
Lisa, did you have a question?
Yes, actually 2.
Sure.
So for the police cars, what are you going to do with the ones that we're phasing out? Because I know that's always a question with the public.
So those, Mayor, Councilor, great question, and always is a question. So when we submit those for bid, the bid process itself is actually built around, and the only way that these retailers, the vendors, will respond to the bid is if they get to, in exchange for providing the new one, conditional on that is the trade-in of that vehicle to them. So I don't get to sell them on the open market. The only way we can get those vehicles at a bearable price is with the inclusion of that old vehicle goes to the vendor on a trade-in. So every one of them, that's where they go is it's conditional. It's a part of the contract we have for the purchase of the new vehicle.
And then follow up, and then
Please.
For the police building, are we sending out RFPs to local companies for the police station?
Mayor, Councilor,
Wyoming companies?
we have not got that far yet. I think it is the city's habit to, and there may be preferences built into it. I'm not really familiar with those large ticket, those very expensive projects. That's a little bit outside of my norm. That question might be better addressed to the city manager.
Would we do a preference for local vendors if and where possible? I know some of that locally they can't do that, but where possible, will we provide for local people?
It's a good question.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, I appreciate the question, and the answer is absolutely. We will seek local help as much as we can. Unfortunately, in Wyoming, there aren't as many contractors that can bond for the amount that we will probably need for the project of this scale. But nonetheless, we will do what we can to attract local interest and statewide interest and see if we can't get the project done with 307 branded companies.
So Chief, can I ask, the 101,497, that's after trade, and that's completely outfitted, wrapped, sirens, radios, the whole deal, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Kyle.
Thanks, Bruce. to Carter's point, there is also an in-state preference, 5% in-state preference, so contractors benefit from that. And then I guess my rebuttal to folks, when we get bids from out-of-state companies, if a company from Virginia is aware of our bids, then my expectation is that the folks that live in this community are aware of those bids too. So, they all get published, they're all public. I very much have a preference for local bids, but if they're not putting in bids, then we do with what we got. My question is more for Carter, I believe. The Opportunity Fund, it is my understanding that was essentially created through excess 1 cent 14 monies. Is that pretty much the basis of that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, it actually, yeah, I think that's correct, 1 cent 14 money. And indeed, we have suggested that for surplus 1 cent money moving forward, like for example, if 16 generates some surplus money, which we believe it will, I would propose that it be set aside in that fund as well, so that we can report very, very closely with regard to how we spend that money and everything else.
Follow up to that?
Sure.
I know this council's drawn from the Opportunity Fund sometimes. I don't know, there might be a question that comes out of this, but it's more an observation that over $5 million of the police department's construction, 5.6, is going to be reliant on Opportunity Fund. And I guess I'm more so just curious, how do we make a project like this pencil without having an opportunity? If we had no excess 14, the Opportunity Fund didn't exist, how does this project even pencil? And I guess the reason I'm asking that question is, it seems like it benefits council to have some sort of, I hope it's not like seen as like a slush fund or something, but it does seem like the Opportunity Fund is totally saving us as far as constructing the police department. And so
It's definitely given us some opportunity.
indeed. So it just worries me, it sounds like the creation of this fund was a result of excess 1 cent monies, but if this fund never was created in the first place, how do we make a project like this happen? Is there anything we as a council can be doing to be more proactive about, and maybe it comes out of our facility assessment, our facility, assessment study, we can start projecting those sorts of things, but it seems like it's really saving us right now as far as constructing the police departments.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, I would agree. And the reality is, this council, previous councils, and so forth have been very careful about not letting that fund get, dissipated as soon as we get it, and so that when projects like this come forward, we are able to help supplement what's available to try to make the project pencil, as you put it. So I'm real grateful that we've been careful with that fund, and I suspect we will need to continue to do that if indeed we do get 1 cent 16 money to sort of backfill what this project will likely pull from that fund.
Last follow-up, sure. Give up the floor. What's the current balance of the Opportunity Fund?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, I would say that this balance that you're talking about, that 5.6, will deplete the remainder of the dollars that we've had from previous 1 cent cycles. I would also suggest, however, that for next fiscal year, you're going to see a balance back in that fund of potentially $5 to $6 million this time next year as well. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Counselor?
Thank you. Chief, I appreciate the 5-year kind of outlook here. And so when I'm trying to wrap my mind around the police car bubble, as we've sort of described it over the last number of discussions, it looks to me like, we have sort of a slightly diminishing cost over, year over year, 1.8 million, 1.7, $1 million, slightly under $1 million as we go forward. Is that something we can continue to anticipate as we kind of work into the maybe a little more like balanced out replacement approach, or are we going to continue? Is there, I assume there's some sort of threshold once the bubble is gone and we're on a replacement schedule that is a little more comfortable. What does that look like? Sort of the where it stabilizes, I guess, is maybe the question.
Mayor, Counselor, great observation, great question. So if you do the math on this, and compare that to the 40 plus 2013s that are out there, at this rate, it's going to take me 4 years to eradicate them from the system. By that time, some of our older models are also going to be falling into this. And so, this, without question, we have tried to front load this to minimize the impact of the continuing operation of these outdated, more expensive to operate vehicles. We are hampered on this front loading by the money on hand, the money that's received from 1 cent money is the ability to do that. We have absolutely front loaded it as to the extent that is possible according to the projected revenues of 1 cent monies as they come in. And so we are prioritized working with our garage to identify the vehicles that are most in need of being replaced. It's not a matter of miles. It's not a matter of the paint is faded and the decals are all worn off and look like crap. Those don't factor into this at all. It's a matter of, has this vehicle reached that lemon status where it's now more expensive to keep it and try to keep maintaining it than it is to get rid of it. And so that's our criteria. So we front loaded it. There are some diminishing years in there, but at the rate we're going, the projections that we provided to council, really not that many months ago, are now outdated because of the escalating costs. We just opened up the most recent bid. It was disappointing to say the least. I have had to take money from other places because the costs keep going up faster than, and so even when they provide a bid for us, it comes with a letter that says, by the way, by the time you get this vehicle, we're not honoring this price. And so our projections have had about every 6 months, we are having to reduce those projections on the number of vehicles that we can purchase. And it is my prediction that it's going to continue to be a matter for council priority, because I'm going to keep coming back to you of, we thought we were going to be able to buy 12, we can only buy 8 with the same amount of money. That leaves me with X amount of 2013s yet to go. So is my opinion, we're looking at a solid 4 years before I'm going to be able to with your help, just eliminate these very in police car year lives. These cars they're elderly, no doubt about it. And so it's gonna be a priority that the police department will keep trying to put back in front of council, really for several years to come.
Follow up. And so after sort of that 4-year process that we go through to try to get ourselves into a better position in terms of the overall, the average age of our fleet, let's say, can you paint me a picture then of what it looks like on an ongoing basis from there? Are we kind of hanging around $1 million, $1.5 million a year, pending some sort of inflation? You expect it to be lower than that?
Mayor,
Sir.
Councilor, this, a good questions. We presented to council, I'm going from memory, I want to say February of last year. We presented that long-term picture. I don't remember the specifics of it, but the goal was to not have council face the tidal wave of 50 simultaneous vehicles. And so we presented to council this kind of, so I would tell you that it is our goal to lessen the tidal wave so that it's more consistent ripples coming in that we have to address. It's been my experience after 31 years of law enforcement now that you really get about 7 years out of a well-maintained, well-driven, professionally cared for police vehicle. And so we're going to, so this concept of working on 10, 11, 12 years, we really kind of need to avoid that. So our future plans are to be able to address that on a annual basis rather than every 4 years or every 5 years going, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, we need $52 million to replace this batch of expired ones. So if we went back to the February, I believe it was February of this last year, there was a comprehensive plan that was presented to council to answer the demands of how do we fix this from happening in the future. Thanks.
Lisa?
I'm just curious, how many vehicles total does the police force have?
140, I think, with all of your own marks.
Mayor, councilor, that includes trailers and, virtually everything that we register. So the big lion's share, I'm going from memory, I think we have 80 plus marked vehicles. That's the important one. That's the one that takes the wear and tear, that's idling all the time. And we're in the 80s for that. As we, council has approved 2 additional SROs. We're going to buy vehicles for that. So our fleet kind of increases. And to account for some of these increases in staffing of the SROs over the last 3 years, we've been forced to keep and hang on to some of these older vehicles instead of trading them in, because we needed to increase the fleet size to make sure that we had the staffing and the backup vehicles that we have. So when I say we have 80 marked police vehicles, some of them are sitting on the side so that when one goes down, that officer just moves their stuff into the backup vehicle. And so we don't lose that operational efficiency. So not only do I have to have the ones that are driven, I have to have that small surplus of vehicles just to make up for the breakdowns and the repairs that are needed.
Any more questions for Chief? Thank you, sir.
Not a question, but Chief was right on the money. It was our February 22nd, 22 meeting. So for further information, I would refer to that meeting packet.
Very good. Who you got next, sir?
Well, I think having a conversation about vehicles to open this conversation tonight is good, because you'll see a lot of rolling stock as it relates to a number of the purchases that we're asking your support for. Now that we're in the transit business and have been for a while now, certainly those expenses are ones that we are very concerned about, and luckily have a partnership with the feds that allow us to do these kinds of things. But Director Becker over there also has buildings and so forth that's under her purview. And aside from buying buses, she has buildings that she's concerned about, and some of those projects we would like her to visit with you about today. So if I could turn time over to Liz, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Becker.
Mr. Mayor, first with transit, we have requested $115,000 to replace the floor in the transit garage, the bus garage that's on site over there. If you have a chance to get over for a tour, we'd love that. Is actually caving in, and it's the building itself is built in 1968, and so the floor is sinking. And so we had gotten a proposal from a local contractor. It not only is falling away from the sides of the wall sides, it's also pinching our sewer that runs underneath there. So we'd like to get that replaced. It's $115,000, and it is forecasted to come from capital reserves as well as some 1 cent 17. We also, at the transit office, again, facility 1968, have an old roof that was on the office building, and that was identified in the building facility assessment that Zulema had commissioned as needing replacement. So we're going to get that roof done, and again, that's forecasted at $25,000, and again, looking at capital reserves for that. Most importantly, with the transit operation, that small office does not currently have any form of ventilation. We have 2 swamp coolers that are in 2 little side windows, and then we have this little wall heater thing. And so we have requested through some of our federal funds, through our grant that will be coming before you for approval, from the federal grant, $25,000 to get an HVAC ceiling or roof-mounted unit there that will provide not only air as well as heat, but more importantly ventilation, because that is not a desirable city building to work in. So that is the transit operation. And we have just a variety of funding sources for those purchases that we'd like to make. The other facility that I oversee is the downtown parking garage. That building facility, many of you probably remember, was built in 1981, 82. And the elevators date back, and they serve 5 floors, and there are 2 of them, and they are down a lot. And again, for our downtown patrons and the office buildings that rely on that parking structure, hiking up any level of the stairs has really been something we've observed more and more frequently over the past few years. And even the DDA, when they managed that, would see the elevators fall into disrepair. So we have put in $325,000, again, looking at capital reserves for the replacement of those 2 elevators, and also to get them up to fire code. And I know our fire chief would agree with that, so that we have the ability to call for help in those needs that might arise there in that parking structure. So again, $325 on that. And then finally, Life Steps Campus that I also oversee, we've got some needs for irrigating. We have really that campus has 9 buildings, facilities on there with housing. We have families on that campus, healthcare for the homeless, and the need to get some new irrigation systems in. That is dated back. It's at least 20 years old, but the PVC pipe has deteriorated to the point that it is cracking. The water is not efficient on the campus, and the sprinkler heads are being replaced constantly by our housing partner, Casper Housing Authority, that manages that campus for us. So that was also added to my list for building facilities, and again, looking at 1 cent, excess 1 cent 16 funds to get that sprinkler system updated for that campus. Otherwise, we're going to be xeriscaping, so that's a possibility too. That's it.
Questions for Ms. Becker? Kyle?
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Liz.
Yes.
I recently attended last Thursday a DCBA Downtown Casper Business Association meeting, and they had representatives from probably 15 different businesses down there. I'm part of the homelessness task force, and so we've been discussing this in that group. I'm liaison to DDA, so we've been discussing it over there as well. But I was really intrigued by the feedback we got at DCBA. That's a lot of folks that I don't hear from in any of those other venues, and they shared a lot about what they're struggling with. They said they have patrons that don't feel safe downtown and have stopped visiting their shops. Their employees don't feel safe walking to their cars at night. They don't use the parking garage because they feel like it's unsafe. A lot of them acknowledge that they are carrying to work now because of altercations they've been involved with, and just, again, this feeling of not being safe downtown. And so I'm curious what else we can look for in the way of, and maybe it's projects that are better left to our partners like DDA and DCBA and other agencies, but I would like this council to explore what more else we can be doing in the downtown area, whether that is better lighting, places like Midwest Avenue that got brought up, the fact that Midwest is very dark behind Eggington's, like the block of Eggington's, there's no lighting right there, it's very dark. It was brought up by Captain Dabney at the meeting, the possibility of some cameras, and I know this council has talked about cameras strategically placed. So I'm not sold 100% on any of those ideas, but I do think it warrants further discussion from our group about what more, if anything, we should be doing downtown, parking garage, to help alleviate some of the concerns that it sounds like nearly every business owner has down there.
Well, if it's okay with you, I'd like to have the chief address that, because they are making some changes in the way they're starting to deal with some of this. Sure. Chief.
Here,
Yes.
Council, thank you for the opportunity to provide some feedback. We've been getting a lot of feedback from Liz's people and her partners that she has out there on, especially when it comes to the safety and the perception of safety at the parking garage. So the police department has been rapidly changing to address the feedback that we've been provided. And so, if you were to look at our department-wide emails here, just in the, for the last couple of weeks, We are increasing our foot patrol. We sweep those elevators. We sweep the stairways of the parking garage. Air call load permits. That's being done every morning before the influx of the community's daily business. People arrive at the parking garage. So we've made a lot of changes to it, but it's become a greater priority for the police department to be more reactive to this feedback that we're getting back of this diminishing feeling of safety when it comes to the patrons being able to use some of our city structures and the city streets down there. So the police department is trying to respond to that just as fast as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions for Ms. Becker before we let her off the hook here? Ms. Pollock.
Maybe a comment along the lines of what Kyle had said, and I don't know if this is something you've explored, Liz, but for the parking garage specifically, I can't remember where I just was, but I saw just a few emergency call boxes at some downtown. Oh, I was in Portland. So they had scattered like you'll see on a college campus or something like that, where you've got the blue call boxes. I don't know if you've considered anything like that in the parking garage. I use the parking garage and I'm frequently very nearby it. I haven't seen a whole lot of activity or change in activity personally, but it certainly doesn't mean that that's not happening. But I saw that's the first time I think I'd seen call boxes outside of a more like a campus type of environment or like a mall or something like that. But I thought it was an interesting idea and might be something that could be helpful, particularly in the garage situation. Is that something you've explored at all?
Mr. Mayor, they are in the garage, or in the elevators.
Emergency calls?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. You have to wait for the
And it
elevator
goes
to come
to the fire department.
Yeah, just to play devil's advocate, it reminds me of the conversation we had about putting a phone outside the fire station. And with our homeless population in that area, I could see that phone becoming extremely abused. And our officers having to respond to a lot of unnecessary things. But in this day and age, I do feel a little more secure with the fact that it is downtown. There are more people around, and most everybody now has a cell phone. So that certainly helps. But I think with the increased police presence in that area and doing their sweeps before the main influx of people are coming, I think that'll be hopefully a deterrent and extremely helpful in that area. And my wife just opened her office down there, and they've got parking spots now in there. So it's of course important to our family as well. So,
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to respond to Councilor Gamroth. The NPO is currently looking at a grant which is Safe Streets, and we are looking solely in the downtown for an area to look at for infrastructure upgrades. And it is one that we're also working with the Disability Council, and I usually miss Councilor Pacheco's here, to get their support on that. But listening to what you heard, I would love to debrief too. I was not able to be at that meeting. I was out of town. But other than the Midwest, which I agree it is dark down there, it would be helpful to get some of those notes, so that we can tailor our grant request. But you will see that coming forward. It is a Safe Streets for All grant, again, that we were able to pick up through the MPO.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone for feedback. Councilor Pollock, she obviously works down there, spends a lot more time down there than I do. I park in the parking garage. I've never had issues with the parking garage. So it always does surprise me when I hear it's very unsafe, but I was equally surprised with how much of a consensus there was from the DCBA group, all of them. So it's not my experience, doesn't sound like it's necessarily yours, but it did surprise me that it seemed to be synonymous in that room. And thanks, Liz, for the information. It sounds like there is going to be a process. You're applying for the grant, it sounds like, without a specific intent in mind, and then there will be a data collection process afterwards to determine whether the majority of people want to see better lighting or potentially cameras, or there's going to be some sort of data collection survey process, it sounds like maybe.
Councilor Gamroth, that is part of what we need to provide, and we are currently embarking on a pedestrian count study. We typically do traffic counts through the MPO each year, but we have commissioned a separate count this year for pedestrian, whether it's cyclists or scooters or people walking, because we do want to be able to get some baseline data on what our foot traffic is like in the downtown core. So yes, Beth Andrus is heading that particular project up for the MPO. More to come. So I've kind of let a little bit of that out of the bag, but that is one that we've been meeting about. So you will
It'd be interesting to see if lighting makes a big difference. I know it wasn't that long ago, we were having Thursday night fights at David Street Station with the young kids under the lights. They didn't deter anything. Our police presence did, and finally got those shenanigans stopped. So it'd be interesting to see if it would make a difference down there, or if we have much foot traffic after dark. I don't know. Guess we'll find out. Any more questions for Ms. Becker before we let her off the hook? Thank you very much, Liz. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor, our next department is support services. You might not think that they have a lot by way of capital need, but when you consider the IT division as for one, and our concern for cybersecurity and those kinds of things, those have an impact as well, those needs. And so if I could turn some time over to Mr. Sepchek, who's standing in on Tracy's behalf tonight, I'd appreciate that.
Certainly, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. As the city manager stated, cybersecurity is one of the projects that we have planned for capital this year. We received a grant through the state Homeland Security Division for $40,000 that we are applying for a cyber intrusion detection service that will basically help provide real-time updates and alerting if there are any attacks that are hitting our system. So, as I stated, that is funded by a grant. The other one is an upgrade to the audio-video system that is basically used here in the meeting room as well as in chambers. That equipment was installed in 2015, so technologically it's 8 years old. It's getting a little long in the tooth, and we've, as you probably experienced and heard complaints, that different pieces of equipment have failed. We've had to have delays in being able to start some meetings because of technological issues. So that's a lot of that is because of equipment failure. We're also looking to get more updated equipment that would be using technology that is more in tune with IT's expertise as opposed to an audio-video person's expertise. So we will be able to support more of that in-house. So that project we have, based on estimates, is $180,000. We have that scheduled out over 2 years. $20,000 of that project is going to be funded through part of our franchise agreement with the cable company for the educational services that they provide with that channel 192. So that money is due this fiscal year. So we'll have that $20,000 to apply to it, and then we'll have another $80,000 is being requested of council for FY24, and then we'll have another $80,000 planned in FY25. Those are the two IT-related projects. The fleet project is portable lift replacement in their facility, and if there's questions on that, I can let Dan answer more to those.
Where do those two $80,000 chunks come from? Is that capital reserve money or?
Mr. Mayor, we do believe that for the $80,000, at least for this year, that would be where we would recommend. For next year, that is a possibility that it would be from there. Fund 150 is what we're saying.
And if we can reduce those costs at all, that is our intent to do as well.
Very good, Kyle.
Thanks, Mike. In regards to the cybersecurity, do you already have a software picked out? And second part of the question, does that software have a security operations center or some sort of additional? Is the monitoring and oversight going to be squarely on internal IT shoulders, or will we have extra resources available to us for the monitoring?
So the initial component that actually intrigued us, that initiated our desire to apply for the grant for this piece, was a hosted service that through a governmental cybersecurity consortium, they actually presented this product. It's called Albert, and that is a hosted intrusion detection monitoring system from the external that would actually monitor our network. That is where we're leaning right now, but we've actually had other discussions about appliances that we could also purchase that would have some of that capability and may give us more bang for our buck. So we're not committed to the hosted service, but that's where the initial direction had been.
Okay, thank you. And then follow up if I may.
Sure.
The AV upgrades, did you have anything specific in mind for, like, specifically what we were going to address with some of those?
One major piece of it is the fact that as part of the City Hall remodel, we will be moving the council meeting room from this location over to the downstairs meeting room. So there will be AV costs associated with that. Another big piece is a lot of the equipment that we have in the back room, the stuff that we've experienced failures with. We want to replace a good chunk of that as well. And then we're also investigating just some of the newer technologies, basically using meeting room technology type stuff to take advantage of some of those resources as well.
Thank you. The reason I ask was, I think I've brought it up before, but I would love to, keeping in mind costs and trying to be economical, I'd love to give the viewer as much autonomy as possible over how they are viewing our meetings. I've brought up 360-degree cameras or something to give people some degree of autonomy, because I believe the last time I joined a meeting remotely in this room, I don't know, Floor or Amanda, or does somebody have to control, like Michael is viewing remotely right now, who controls what he sees on his screen? Okay. So, Floor has to spend time during the meeting trying to manage what people are seeing and stuff like that. It'd be great for the viewer to just have that control so that Floor can focus on other things. Because there are times, we can screen share so I can see the screen, but I can't necessarily see you, that like Michael can't see you right now. He might be able to see what's on screen if we have it set to that, but you just lose a lot of the context when you just lose a lot of the context. I'd love to give people as much context as possible, so I'm glad to hear that we're exploring some, innovative, kind of more current solutions. I watched the Natrona County School Board meeting last night, and their AV is terrible. It looks like you're, got to use binoculars or something just to see those people. So just want to make sure that we're not setting up something like that.
Did you lodge a complaint?
I did. I should though. Can't see nothing, man.
So we're gonna have drones flying all over. Any more questions for Michael or IT?
Or for Dan.
Or for Dan? Doesn't look like it. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you.
As the guttural response that the mayor's offering might indicate, our next department to hear from is Public Services. Without a doubt, streets is a large part of what we consider and work on in Public Services. And we certainly have an array of those projects on the slate, as it were, for next fiscal year. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, if I can turn time over to Mr. Beamer, that'd be great.
Andrew, please.
Mayor, Council. We do have some street projects slated for next year. We talked recently about Westridge, just the other council meeting, that Phase 2 is going to be slated for fiscal year 24. We've got Brian Evansville Road, which is the road east of Bryan Stock Trail that goes from there east to the city limits past the wastewater treatment plant. If you've driven on that road in the recent past, you can tell it's really not much of a road anymore. So that road needs to be completely reconstructed. We're going to finish off K Street from St. Mary to Bryan Stock Trail. That's the last stretch. We've done a number, 3 phases to get from Center Street out to St. Mary. So this will complete the sidewalk connection and some underground utility needs that we have out there. We had a water and storm sewer blow up at 8th and Long Drainage, or 8th and Shannon, that we need to fix. And we got some smaller projects, one actually just out here by A Street, some storm drainage improvements. We have to fund the second phase of the co-op agreement with YDOT for those enhancements to get between McKinley Street and East Yellowstone. That's what that $88,000 dollars is for. And we got some rolling stock for streets and Chad's crew. These Graco buggies don't get confused with a kid's toy. Those are to do the parking lot striping and the curb painting. We have a lot of parking lots and a lot of curbing that we need to take care of throughout this community as well. We talked about the MCC project. We got $2 million for that. So that's the big project that's going to be going on at the wastewater treatment plant. That's a $3.5 million project. We've got a lot of rolling stock up at Belleville, both in the refuse and actually the Belleville Fund. That's almost primarily rolling stock for those entities. For CPU, we still have about $1 million going to both water and sewer. Kind of keeping that close to our chest because we're still a little nervous about where the bids are going to come in for First and Poplar. We've got a big exposure there with the sewer lift station and the water mains that we need to take care of as part of White Ice project. And we've also got $1.5 million in addition to the $1 million that we've already got budgeted for a new CPU garage to move what is now meter services, which is at the service center out off of K Street out to the water distribution garage, which is out by the water treatment plant. So that's very briefly some of the bigger projects we have going on in PSD slated for next fiscal year. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So Midwest is not on the radar this year?
Midwest is budgeted for this fiscal year.
It is.
Mayor. Yes.
Kyle.
Thanks, Bruce. So, Andrew, is it fair to say you're checking questions on water, waste, sewer, and streets right now?
Mayor, Councilor, that is absolutely correct.
All right. Well, I will start with streets then. I noticed our capital budget for streets is like 4.5. 4.1, which I believe last year it was 10. So I was curious if you could help give us some context about the 50% reduction, and let's start there. Thanks.
Mayor, Councilor, very good question. The funding we have for fiscal year 24 is a combination of two things. We've got 1 cent 17, which keep in mind we don't accrue, or we're now beginning to accrue, so we got very limited funds being allocated to 1 cent to fiscal year 24. And then we got the balance of 1 cent 16 that was originally due to streets that is now available for fiscal year 24. This fiscal year was a catch-up year in which we had excess 1 cent money, which is why you saw a balloon in capital projects for the current fiscal year that we're in.
Okay, thank you. The reason I ask is because obviously I bring up streets all the time, and I'm glad that we are budgeting more for streets, but I didn't know, I've only been on council 2 years, so I've only seen 2 capital budgets. Well, I guess maybe this is the third one. But I was just curious, I mean, the capital budget is nearly as much as we've budgeted from general fund, I guess, is that the distinction you make? Okay. So it almost seems to me like the capital budget is more of a factor on the condition of the streets than what we budget out of the general fund. Would you agree with that, I guess?
Mayor, Councilor, your capital funding for streets is almost exclusively 1 cent funding.
Okay.
So those capital projects that you see being done by contractors around this community is almost exclusively 1 cent.
Okay.
And grant money, and grant money. I should include that. Operationally, when you allocate money operationally to streets, that goes into striping. It goes into pothole patching. It goes into ice slice material. It goes into actually purchasing hot mix. It goes into the operations that we do internally.
Okay. So these projects are all, for the most part, going to be funded by 1 cent. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'll let someone else have the floor while I think about some of the other topics.
Is there anyone else with anything? If you're needing, if you're needing a breather, this is off the cusp, but is there a reason that Walcott Street is closed to parking on the one side? There's ample parking spots available, and they're all painted yellow, so nobody could park there.
Mayor, what block of Walcott?
Between First and Second.
Between First and Second?
There is ample parking available there and wouldn't impede the flow of traffic, but everything's painted yellow.
Mayor, I believe that's the federal courthouse is on the east side of that street, and I think that was a safety concern of theirs to prevent parking on that side of the street.
Gotcha. Okay.
They don't want a Murrah Federal Building.
Pardon?
They don't want a Murrah Federal Building. I did have a question.
Go ahead, Steve.
Are you anticipating, because of this winter, are you anticipating having to increase your general fund budget to cover potholes and stuff?
Mayor, Councilor, not only pothole patching, but also the fuel costs and the overtime costs. This winter, we haven't seen a winter like this in quite a few years, probably, I'm going to say decades, with snow, and then we get it cleaned up, and then it just snows, and then the wind, and so Mayor, I'd let Carter know that the budget is already busted on our fuel and overtime costs for streets.
And we're not even up to Pothole Palooza yet, which is coming, what?
Mayor, Councilor, some would say we are already there. But
Okay.
now with this nicer weather and this moisture and the freeze that's leaving the ground, we're going to start seeing the potholes.
I just reported my first one yesterday.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. Kyle, did you have something else, or do you want me to defer to Carter right now?
As long as I have another opportunity
You
before
will.
we move on.
Go ahead, Carter, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Andrew, one of the things that we have talked about as a group, including your input and so forth, is along the lines of capacity to do projects and so forth. Some have been concerned that if indeed you did have extra money, you might not have the capacity to do extra projects, particularly in the streets world. Do you care to comment on that a little bit? I think currently we set aside, with 1 cent 17 anyway, somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million a year, which is somewhat of an improvement. I assume you could take more if it were available.
Mayor, Carter, absolutely. I mean, we do a number of projects in-house, but for the larger projects, we will farm out to consultants, and they'll be more than happy to do additional work for the city. So we could certainly handle an additional capital agenda if there was additional funding to do so.
And you think you'd have the timing to facilitate it?
Mayor, we do, yes.
Okay, good to know. Kyle, thank you.
Thank
Do you have anything else?
No,
Okay.
sir, that's it.
On page 162, there was Sun 1 South Tank interior repair, 350 grand. And I was curious, it sounds like there was a visual inspection and that was what determined that water tank needed repaired. I was curious when our staff is doing a visual inspection of the water tank, what would they find that would necessitate a tank repair is the first part of the question. And number two, the water quality. We test that when it leaves the regional water distribution center. I guess I'm curious, when we're testing water, do we test it after it leaves the tank or is it before it leaves the tank?
Mayor, Councilor, very good question. When you see a water tank repair, that's almost always going to be a tank painting. So when we empty a tank, we may see some staining, but we test the water throughout the system, not only when it leaves the plant, but we have testing stations throughout this community. We're always testing the water to make sure it's suitable for consumption.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else?
Just as an aside to go along with that, how often do you drain the tanks?
Some of the, Mayor, Councilor, some of these tanks we don't need to have in service during the winter months, as we just simply don't have that demand. So some tanks get drained every winter, and we will drain probably, try and do it strategically so we're not wasting water, but we will inspect tanks probably every 3 to 4 years.
Lisa?
What's the cost of that? Draining and tank and refilling
Mayor, Councilor, the cost of that is the cost of water.
a lot.
Well, it can be, or yeah, it certainly can be, but we try to and draw the tank down naturally so we're not wasting a lot of water. Yes.
Okay.
Kyle? Last shot, buddy.
I feel like it's such a wasted opportunity.
It's not like you can't call Andrew anytime you
I
want.
know.
He'd be happy to talk to you, so,
That's all I have for the moment, thank you.
thank you. Thank you, Andrew, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
This will be Andrew's last capital meeting with us, Mr. Mayor, last budgeting process.
Quitter, I mean, retiree.
Mayor's not my last meeting, however.
Noted. Okay, sir, shall we?
Yes, the fire department has a number of needs as well, and maybe we can turn some time to Chief and walk us through something.
Chief Black.
Mr. Mayor, councilors. Okay, So we do have a number of needs. The majority of our needs are all maintenance required, upkeep. We're just keeping up with current equipment that we have that needs to be replaced and refunded. You'll see some of our larger purchases, like this Station 3 steel roof replacement. That's been an ongoing issue with Fire Station 3 since we built it. And I think we're finally coming to a point where we're going to be able to get it replaced. And it's been difficult, to say the least. The manager can attest to that. It should have been replaced by warranty work right when it was built, but it got lost in translation, and here we are having to fork out $308,000. We are receiving a bond back from one of our previous engagements with the contractor, so that's going to help alleviate some of that. That's our biggest expenditure, and that is going to come out of capital reserves.
So Jake, if I can just ask you while you're on that subject, that 100 and what is it, 20 or 30 that we're getting, will that come off of that 308, or was the roof going to be 438 and now it's 308?
Well, we don't know what it's going to be exactly yet. It's going to have to go out to bid, and we're going to have to see exactly where people are coming in at.
So that's just a guess, and that doesn't include the bond money?
No.
Okay. Well, that's good news for us.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, it does include the.
Oh, it does include it?
Yeah, that's right. So what you're seeing is a combination of money we've had previously in that budget line, that project, as well as the bond money from the failed project.
Oh, I see it now. So that's not as good a news as I thought it was. Okay. Thank you.
The bond?
Well, I thought we could take I didn't see the bottom line, the funding source. I thought we could take the 129 off the 308 and we were going to be in really good shape. Yeah. So please continue. Sorry. Thank you for the clarification.
Bummer. The other large purchase you see up here is for our replacement of our extrication equipment. And that equipment is old and dilapidated. It's fallen apart, and that's what we use to cut people out of vehicles. We've had to patch it up over the last year. Some emergency measures have been taken. Emergency repairs have been taken. It's 12 years old and needs to be replaced, so it's time. Our all-band portable radios, this is just for our personnel to have communications. It's important for us all to be able to talk. This is in the process of getting everybody with up-to-date radios with our current technology. And, communication is the first thing that we need in all of our incidents, so it's an important need. The rest of this stuff, Station 1 gear drying cabinet, Station 3 gear drying cabinet, Station 5 extractor gear dryer, those are items that we use to wash our bunker gear. Our bunker gear is what we wear to go into fires and hazardous situations. When we go in there, we get exposed to a bunch of carcinogens, and as soon as we get done with that scene, we decon it, and these extractors and dryers help in getting those carcinogens off of our clothing and getting it cleaned and ready to get back into service. We've got replacement of the CRR vehicles. This is spillover from some previous year's budget workings and getting these vehicles replaced. The reason we're still looking at it is because of increases in costs and delays in manufacturing, and this is going to help button that up. Our red boat motor, that's a necessary item for river rescue operations. That helps us go up and down the river with a powered motor. That's a jet motor. It doesn't have a prop, and so we're able to go in some of that shallower water without damaging a prop. Outside of that, I think that's all I've got up there. Does anybody have any questions?
Lisa?
What's a CRR vehicle?
Community risk reduction. That's our division of personnel that are in charge of fire investigations, inspections, public education. Those are our day officers that are doing that preventative work in the city and the fire service.
So it's going to be replaced for $19,000?
Well, 3 of them have been we've been working on replacing them over the past couple of years,
Okay.
and this is just spillover from that.
Okay.
It just ended up where inflation and lack of parts and things like that just extended it into where we're at.
We'll note at the end.
Any more questions for Chief? Boy, you got off easy.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
We get to hear from Ms. Lopez a lot as it relates to capital needs and the building, facility study, and all those kinds of things. Her needs occupy significant space in the capital budget as well, in that she oversees buildings and structures as well as parks and rec. So with that, Mr. Mayor, if I could turn some time over to Ms. Lopez.
You're on the clock, man. This is more normal. We're used to Salima coming to us and saying, give me money.
Mayor, councilors, thank you very much. As the city manager mentioned, I am honored to be responsible for not only our buildings and structures division, but all of our parks and recreation divisions as well. In total, there are 12. Despite that, I'm asking for less than $4 million, a lot of which is funded through grants and other sources. And so really the two big projects that I wanted to highlight for you this evening are the Aquatic Center roof replacement. And of course, we've talked about that in a previous work session. You know that thanks to Jill's brilliance, we've devised a funding solution for that project that includes a loan application to the state of Wyoming, and then we will use allocated 1 cent 17 funds that were approved by you all to repay that loan over time. So that is a significant part of the less than $4 million that I'm asking for. The other...
Salima, while you're on that subject, if I may, I want to be very clear to the public when they hear the word loan and the city's borrowing money. We're borrowing money against future 1 cent money that's already been, we just haven't collected it yet. So, and this is a very low interest loan through this state, I believe, right,
Yep,
Carter?
that's exactly.
And so it allows us to get the roof done now while the materials are where they are. And then it will be paid back through the 1 cent money that would have taken care of the roof anyway, but we're saving a bunch of money by being able to get it done now instead of 4 years when material costs go up. So I just wanted to be very clear about that for the public. Thank you.
Mayor, thank you. And
Yes, ma'am.
the significant consideration is the time piece.
Correct.
And being able to address that situation sooner than later. The other large project that I wanted to talk to you about is actually Washington Park Phase 1. So that is a parks improvement project at Washington Park, which we consider one of our flagship parks in the community. And we have gotten some notice from the state, and of course it's not final until we get a notice to proceed, but the state board did approve a funding of about approximately $570,000 for that project. That is a 1-to-1 match, so we would have to come up with $570,000 in match for the project, which includes, we did have to revise the scope. Our original ask for this grant was just shy of $1 million, and so we're very grateful to be funded for over half of what we asked for, but because it was reduced, we did have to reduce the scope of the project. So in this phase, we will be able to convert 2 of the existing tennis courts to dedicated pickleball courts, which I'm sure all of you have heard from people in that community, and they're very excited to have an outdoor facility in our community finally. The other 2 courts will remain untouched so that we're not eliminating tennis from Washington Park at this time. We will replace the light poles and fixtures at the Washington Park ball field, which of course those lights are in desperate need of replacement. And also we will renovate the restrooms that exist in the midget football storage building currently, but have been closed to the public because they are not in good condition and they are not ADA compliant. And so they've been closed for a number of years. We will completely renovate those, bring them up to ADA compliance, and open them up to the public during the season. So those are really our primary projects in our department, we have a very small ask in facilities, buildings and structures, to purchase sewer equipment because, as you know, through the process of evaluating the facility and condition assessment and how we would start to tackle all the needs across our facilities, we identified that we definitely need to do some additional inspection so that we're making sure that the money that we are spending is best placed in the needs of those facilities. And so $15,000 toward the sewer inspection equipment that would allow us to inspect the sewer service lines within our buildings. And then in terms of equipment, other equipment needs, the vast majority of recreation was not funded at all for any projects in FY24. We were fortunate enough to get some projects or are asking for some projects in Hogadon, in parks, and in the municipal golf course. The lion's share of the municipal golf course ask actually is coming from golf course reserves. So that is, money that is in that fund that comes from the revenue from passes and user fees. And so we have a small project, the $6,000 project is actually residual 1 cent $16 that we have for municipal golf course. Everything else is being paid for out of that reserve. In parks, the majority of this ask is, you see the big one over $1 million here is for Washington Park, half of that being grant funding. The rest of this money is 1 cent 16 funds that were allocated to miscellaneous park improvements and or miscellaneous irrigation improvements and or fleet replacements for parks. And so those funds are being spread across divisions to pay for rolling stock as well as some irrigation needs. One being the raw water tie-in that we talked about when we were talking about reducing our water consumption costs and for irrigating our parks. And some work to help us install and expedite the installation of our baseline irrigation control system, which is the system that we talked about, should help reduce irrigation costs moving forward. It's really, those are the highlights. There wasn't a whole lot, unfortunately, that we were able to fund in FY24 or request funding for in FY24. We hope future years will go better.
Amber?
Thank you. Under buildings and structures, looks like the projected capital only goes through fiscal year 25. Is that pending further investigation on some of the results of the facilities analysis, or what's the reason for the short-term projection there?
Mayor, Councilor, thank you for pointing that out. So buildings and structures is somewhat unique in that there's one facility that actually belongs in the Buildings and Structures Fund. That is the shop that we work out of, and then we have fleet replacements. In general, all of the facility maintenance projects will fall under those respective divisions, with the funding source being 1 cent 17 facility improvements. So you will see roof projects, for instance, like Chief mentioned, that roof project will fall under fire, but in certain cases moving forward will be funded by the allocation that you all made from 1 cent 17 for facility improvements.
Thank you.
Kyle?
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks, Ulima, for the information. I had a question about the municipal golf course improvements. You already answered it, saying it was coming from the reserve funds, but I was just curious how, without you having said that, am I missing something? And I wasn't able to deduce that, I guess, from our memos and stuff like that. So I was just curious how we know where those funding sources are.
Mayor, Councilor, as I understood it, the packet did include projects by funding source. And so it's just a different way that we extract from our financial system how projects are being funded. And so as Pete's pulling up, you can see which projects are being funded by 1 cent 16, which projects are being funded by 1 cent 17.
I see. So other funding cure is it has golf course reserve funds. It's
Weed and Pest Reserve Funds, which is one that I failed to mention. I apologize for that. But so Weed and Pest is a fund that is funded by a mill levy. And so the all of the replacements for that fund
Okay.
come out
So
of.
that designation is a combination of multiple other funding sources, not 1 cent and otherwise? Okay, thank you. That answered my question.
And Pete or Jill could explain if it's beyond just fund reserves for those funds that have reserves or others. I know Weed and Pest and Municipal Golf Course, I'm not sure if there are others.
Thank you, Zulima. Thanks for letting me give you heck. With that, do we have any other questions for Zulima? Building structures, Parks and Rec, good to go? Thank you very much. Does that conclude, sir?
Mr. Mayor, councilors, that is a rundown broadly of the projects that we have available for, or being proposed, I should say, for the 2024 fiscal year agenda. Indeed, the thing that I would remind you of is that when you're comparing budget years to budget years and so forth and looking at dollars compared to previous years, 9 times out of 10, the differences are made up primarily with regard to what it is your capital agenda looks like. And so this is a real critical aspect of what it is that we do in preparation for the budget. We obviously have other budget discussions we need to have with you, and they are, as you can see on your agenda, coming up here in rapid fire over the next 6 or so weeks. But nonetheless, pursuant to whatever feedback you have tonight or other direction that you might have, this is likely what we'll move forward with and build budget books with as it relates to the projects that we have coming up here. So any other feedback or guidance, we'd sure appreciate.
I do have one question. I'm assuming, since the department heads are still here, that everything that was proposed tonight is something that can be facilitated and completed in our 2024 fiscal year. Is that correct?
It's definitely the hope, yeah. I mean, there's always insinuating circumstances.
And I understand.
Yeah.
Particularly, I would say with fleet replacements, because a lot of times we're over a year out.
Right, which worries me is the amount budgeted appropriate for, do we look ahead and, consider that, I guess, when we're coming up with those?
With these numbers?
Yeah, because if something goes unfunded, like she said, like a vehicle, and it gets pushed out a year, well, that 50,000 is now 65, possibly.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder, does that go back into the pool then? And then we come back like Jake did and say, Chief Black, and where he only needs 19,000 for a brand new vehicle because we're adding to what had already been funded for that. Is that more what that would look like for us then?
Mr. Mayor, I think that's a pretty good example of what some of the pressures are that we're dealing with from time to time.
Okay, I understand. I just was trying to wrap my head around it a little
No
better.
problem.
So thank you very much. So is everybody okay with the way the capital, I guess, ideology has been presented to us? Are we good to move forward with that? Or to, I guess, give Carter the direction to move forward to that in his budgeting process? Everybody okay with that? Michael, did you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I just a question. I think the capital projects budget becomes the overall city budget that we would adopt in June. Is that correct?
Michael, I'm gonna ask you to slow down just a little bit and try again because it's really broken the way we're able to hear you. So let's try.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's quite all right. I'm sure it's not you. I'm sure it's our technical stuff. So if you could just slow down a little bit and try again, we'll see if we can pick up what you're saying.
Sure. So I'm just wondering if this is part of the overall city budget, correct? That we will adopt in June?
Yes.
Okay. And as part of that, this is just a process clarification. As part of that process, are there public hearings prior to the adoption of the budget?
Mm-hmm. Yep, certainly are. And it's
Okay,
a
I just
very,
wanted to make sure.
it's also a very long, arduous process that we will, well, that technically started tonight and will go all the way through the adoption in July, literally. So there's a lot of room for discussion and public weigh-in as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else for concerning the capital budget review? I got a thumbs up from everybody, yes, on that?
I wonder,
No thumbs up?
I was just wondering if I could pester Andrew with a couple more questions.
Mr. Beamer?
Mayor, Councilor?
Thanks. I appreciate everyone's patience. I'm a very curious fellow. They were all related to the bail fill. I don't know if you're, I thought maybe Cindy would be here tonight, but,
Cindy's father's not doing well.
oh,
I'm sorry to hear that.
sorry to hear that. If you don't mind, I'll just rapid fire them out real quick so that we can move on. And if you can't answer them, I understand because some of them get a little nuanced. But part of it was automatic trash can washers. I was just kind of curious how that works. I wasn't aware the city picked up trash cans for like cleaning and stuff, so I was curious logistically how that works.
Mayor, Councilor, very good question. You may not think, well, why do you need to wash a trash can? But Mayor, Councilor, I can tell you sometimes you don't know what is put in these trash cans. Not only on the trash cans around the neighborhood parks, but also in people's homes. And occasionally they get so foul that they need to be cleaned. So it's much like you might expect it to be. Your dishwasher is just an automatic can washer.
How do you, I've never seen a garbage truck take trash cans with them. How do you collect, are you collecting like 20 at a time? And if so, how are you doing that?
Mayor, Councilor, on a flatbed truck.
Okay.
We'll pick them up and take them back to the shop and clean them.
Thank you. That was interesting to me. There was $154,000 for recycling depot, allocation, I imagine, to, repair those or maybe replace them if necessary and stuff like that. I was curious, I don't know if you know much of the, ins and outs of the recycling program. Last time we had Cindy in front of us, I asked her about our contamination. A couple years ago, it was 25%. She said that's reduced greatly, I imagine, as a result of the MRF facility that was constructed. I was more so curious, the capital budget had like trailers where we keep all of the recycling materials, I imagine, until we bring them to other recycling facilities around the country. Do you know anything about like our plastic that we sort and package and put into trailers here? Where do we take that? Do you know what's done with it?
Mayor, Council, we do have a broker, and I believe that brokerage is in Denver, I want to say, but Cindy is the subject matter expert on that, Councilor. But I believe it's in Denver.
Okay, I know China stopped accepting single-use plastics a couple years ago, and so I just didn't know where these materials were going. I'm just curious where they're going.
Yeah, that is the purpose of the trailers, though. We bail them, and then until we have a big enough load.
Okay. And then just one other question, and then I'll let you go. I was surprised to learn we have a backup fleet for our garbage trucks. It sounds like it's almost a 1-to-1, like we have as many backups as we do like in operation at one time. So I was just curious, how often are, I guess I was looking for clarification that we are essentially maintaining 2 fleets and how often those backup trucks are used.
Mayor, Council, we are on a 7-year rotation. I'm not sure we're at a 1-to-1 with that kind of a, each one of those side loader or rear loader is about $350,000, $400,000. So we don't have a 1-to-1 backup, but we do have vehicles that go down. Replacement is over a year out, close to a 2-year now, I think, on some of this equipment. And parts are difficult to come by as well. So it's not quite the 1-to-1, but we certainly do have backup equipment.
Okay, thank you. One last clarification. 11 or 12 side load trash trucks. The 2 memos have different numbers. One of them says 12 side loads, the other one says 11 side loads.
Mayor, I believe this one.
Okay,
Councilor.
12? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beamer. Now, may I get a thumbs up to give the city manager direction to move on with this item in his budget? Everybody okay with that? All right, very good. Sir?
Oh, I would ask questions all night.
Well, luckily, they have phones, and you can call them anytime you want. So, Okay, let's move on to, and thank you, all the department heads, for being here and giving us the information that's well received and well needed. So let's move on to budgeting for grants, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilors, we have the interesting scenario upon us where now that we are taking, as I mentioned earlier, a much more aggressive approach and effort to pursue grants, in particular in the federal grant world, the issue of supplanting is something that they are very concerned about, and accordingly something we need to be concerned about, so that as we receive these funds and so on, and more importantly, position ourselves competitively to seek these funds, we don't create problems for ourselves or concerns for them as it relates to granting us those awards. So as it relates to that concern, we need to be sure that you're comfortable with the approach that we're taking, so that indeed it doesn't appear as though, or we don't find ourselves in a situation, let me put it that way, where staff is getting ahead of council, or council's not clear as to why we're doing certain things, particularly as it relates to budgeting and identifying those projects that we need to pursue. And so with that, if I could turn some time over to Jill to walk us through the need for this policy and perhaps some of the specifics as it relates to the elements of this policy, I would certainly appreciate that.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. So as has already been set up by the city manager, there are some issues relating to federal grants and supplanting. So what is supplanting? That means that we have put something in our budget, we go out and get a federal grant, we take that money and now we can apply it to the project that we already have in our budget. That's supplanting. We're replacing our budgeted money with federal dollars. We cannot do that. That will cause many, many major problems with our federal grants. So we do a lot of things with federal grants, or we try to. We actually are very active in trying to get a lot of federal grants for the River Fund. I think also Suleima's been very active in trying to get that for our recreational assets as well. So what we are doing from a budgeting standpoint is we are not going to budget those projects at this time. Instead, we will wait until we get a firm approval that yes, we are going to get those dollars. Then we will come back to you with our project, with our federal funding or our grant funding, and request approval at that time. It'll typically come through a budget amendment. So that is the philosophy that we're going to use, and we just wanted to see if you were okay with that, and hopefully we can move forward.
Can I ask a question, please? Is it illegal to supplant, or is it just frowned on? And so we don't want to do that and put ourselves in that position.
Actually,
can you clarify?
It is typically written into your grant documents, so you cannot do it. Federal dollars are very directed at supplanting. I mean, they look at that. State dollars, not as much, and local grants can be pretty flexible, but it's typically written into your grant documents. If they find that you do that, they can claw that money back, so we would have to return it.
So one of the advantages I see to doing it this way now would be you would already have your matching funds available when you came to us for that budget amendment and say, here's what we're looking for, we've got the money here already. And so a much easier decision for council at that time.
Exactly. We would have the project that we're going to do, and all of the revenue sources would be identified.
Yeah, that's great. Amber, did you have something?
Maybe. I'll see if it's, after I say it, if it makes any sense. So I'm thinking about situations specifically that maybe we, would put us at risk of these, where I've seen, here's the budget, this much is coming from the grant, this much is coming from matching funds, and we've budgeted those matching funds. And then what I'm curious about is if we change that process, presumably we wouldn't be preliminarily budgeting the matching funds either, or would we be, and then have just like a question mark next to the where the rest of the money is going to come from? What does this do to our ability to presume need for matching fund budgeting, if anything?
So that's a great question. We typically wouldn't budget the match either until we budget the project and the grant. If we don't get the grant, we wouldn't need the match. So, and we wouldn't do the project. So it would all come together in one package with all of the expenses and all of the revenue put together for you.
So we wouldn't be able to foresee matching funds until we were further along in the process, and then we would get a recommendation from staff about the need for the matching funds and where they would come from.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you'd still actually be able to foresee it. You just wouldn't bring it to us until you had everything in a line.
That is correct.
Gotcha.
It gets back to basically, in our capital budget, we are spending money we don't have.
Correct.
We don't have the grant, therefore, we're not gonna budget for it.
That's correct. And I could see that
Kinda-
being very presumptuous and the Fed's getting irritated with that. That certainly makes sense. So, yeah. Well,
So-
thank you.
You're welcome. So you will notice in our capital budget that we did have some of the items that were identified as having federal funds as the revenue source. Those are things which we have gotten affirmation that yes, you will receive those funds. So they are in our budget. It's just things which we don't have. Either we haven't applied for it or we really don't have a good idea that we are going to get those funds that are not included.
Fair enough. Sure.
Mr. Mayor, just to be abundantly clear as well, these projects and these efforts and so forth that we undertake will not be a surprise to you. These are things that are going to be discussed with you ahead of time. You'll know the strategy that we're pursuing. The River Fund is a great example of that, in that you know where the reaches are, you know what the cost for each of those are, and you know that we're trying to pursue money to try to make those projects happen. It will be my effort that we will never get ahead of you and never surprise you with regard to projects that we're pursuing, unless at the very, very beginning of the idea discussion, you don't like the idea, then we won't expend the effort. So you'll have plenty of opportunity to turn down the project, as it were, and thereby save us all the effort to pursue those grants, if indeed the project just doesn't fit in your vision of what we need to be doing.
And I think that's fair because there's always opportunities sometimes to latch onto federal dollars, but we don't want to give up the matching dollars because we've got them earmarked for something else. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, it makes good sense. Jill, thank you very much. Anybody have any questions for Ms. Johnson concerning the budgeting for grants?
It's not a question, but knowing the record keeping that has to go along with these federal grants it would be a shame to start tying up everything else and then not get the grant. So we need to know for sure that we're getting the grant. That was part of the deal with the CDBG money, was that it was so laborious from a record keeping standpoint that we've in essence farmed it out.
Right. Jenna?
I was just noticing Michael has his. I didn't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't. Michael, do you have something?
Yeah, we'll try this again. I shut off the camera, so maybe that will make it better.
Yeah, it sounds much better.
I just want to, is that better?
Yeah, much.
It's better?
Much
Okay,
better,
good.
yes.
All right, I just wanted to clarify with Jill. So my understanding of supplanting, I'm thinking about it a little bit differently than just matching. I'm sure that figures into it, but when I think about supplanting with federal money with local money, it's the idea of paying for something with federal money that typically should have or historically has been paid by local funds. Am I thinking about that too strictly, Joe? I don't quite understand the interplay with matching.
Great question, Counselor. So when we think of supplanting, we think of not necessarily the match, because the match isn't something that we would replace. We would actually continue to do the match. It's actually the federal dollars for the project. If we budget it, and we budget it to come out of capital reserves or somewhere like that, and then we get a grant and we say, oh, well, we're not going to use capital reserves now, we're going to use our federal dollars. That is supplanting. And we are not allowed to do that. That would be an example.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
thank you. Yes, thank you.
All right, very good. Ms. Johnson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we have a better understanding, or at least I do, anyway. I don't know what that's worth. Kyle?
Thanks. I just had questions before we moved on to the sixth item on the agenda, so.
Sure.
Thanks. And it's for Carter.
Okay.
So in regards to the 5-year capital plan, it's on page 224 of our packet. I noticed we have $5 million in repairs at Fort Casper coming up over the next 4 years, $5 million at Hogadon over the next 3 years, $4 million for the ice arena, which we, I believe we're discussing, a low interest loan from the state to cover that, but the $9 million at Hogadon and Fort Casper over the next 3 to 4 years, this harkens back to my line of inquiry about the opportunity fund. Where do you expect those funding, looking out over the next few years, where do you expect us to find that funding, especially with the opportunity fund totally depleted? And it sounds like we're already kind of figuring out where excess 1 cent 17 is going to go. So I'm just curious where that $9 million is potentially coming from.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, I would say that the answer to those particular projects and the needs that each of those dollar figures represents have not been resolved at this point. For example, at the Hogadon facility, that particular project is with respect to a new lift facility. It would be hard for me to recommend that over replacing Metro for probably a real similar amount of money at that point in time. And so when you talk about the opportunity fund and the fact that we're hoping that it'll hold $5 to $6 million, obviously we can only apply that to one project that you and I are talking about right now. I'm not aware that there's a whole lot of grants out there that deal with lift replacements. Hopefully there will be, by the time we are at this point in the future. Same with Fort Casper. There are a number of needs out there that over time we're going to have to face and deal with. And at this point in time, I'm hard pressed to tell you where that money's going to come from. However, taking it incrementally, looking at grants as well, trying to find private donations as a part of this will undoubtedly be the exercise that we go through in preparation for that moment in time.
Thanks. Amber?
On that note, and since you brought up, some of these projects that we probably need to anticipate, but may come into conflict when it comes time to actually budget for them with other projects. Metro, I noticed, was missing from this 5-year projection. It would be helpful to me if those are in there, if it suits you as a placeholder, so that we can see where some of those tension points are going to be. And not everything under the sun, of course, but some of those really big ticket items that are going to have to get prioritized. To me, that's what I like to see in these 5-year projections, or where are those points of tension, what years are going to, or periods of years are going to stack up in a way that's going to make it unmanageable for us to fund everything, and how might we better spread things out in order to strategize and prioritize. So I don't know if there are other things that you feel like are maybe omitted from this 5-year projection that are all gonna start to hit their date around that time, or if there's any other detail in that way that you can provide in the 5-year outlook. But it's certainly helpful to me to understand which of those years are gonna be problematic for us.
Well, to your point, in fairness, like me personally, I won't be on council after 2 more years. Yeah. But I feel like I have a duty to watch out for,
and to prepare.
Yeah, and to prepare future councils for that, instead of just looking, I've only got 2 years to go, let's get done what we can. So, and that's why we do these projections. So to your point, I think that's very fair. So,
Mr. Mayor, and I would add to your point, Councilor, as you think about Zulima's facility study, some of the other things that we know are on our horizon, like Fire Station 1, and perhaps the admin facility for the fire department and Metro and on and on. You're right. We've got 130 buildings and properties that we need to work on and touch sometime between now and the next 10 years. Would be my estimate. And obviously, we're taking pieces and parts out of that. Hopefully, City Hall will be one of those that we can remove from that horizon. Certainly, the police department's facility and so on. The reason I say this, and the reason I like what you're proposing, even if it is kind of obnoxious with respect to each of the little items we're going to see over the next 5 years, and maybe even feel a little overwhelmed by it all. I like it because, when it comes time to consider revenue strategies that we need to be very serious about that would generate capital money over the next 5 to 10 years, it's those kinds of agendas that really bring to light the importance of trying to embrace out-of-the-box revenue strategies that historically we maybe have all been uncomfortable with. One in particular that I'm really excited about to talk to you about in the next budget process, the one we're working on right now, is the revenue replacement strategy for direct distribution. If indeed we can be successful with that, we can ostensibly have another $4 million a year as long as direct distribution is in place to dedicate to capital needs over time and not be used in an operational environment like we're doing right now. And so when it comes time for those kinds of things, which often requires tough decisions to be made as a part of those strategies, the capital agenda in a more fleshed out form will be a great reminder to consider those kinds of things more seriously.
And additionally, we're soon going to be in a situation like our police department is with their vehicles. Our buildings are aging. Mm-hmm. We have 130 buildings, and everybody says, "What's the city doing with all their money?" Well, there's only so much to go around.
Yeah.
And we're getting up. Well, like this building, for instance, it's reaching its maturity where it needs a lot of upgrades, and a lot of our buildings are going to be coming due at the same time, just like the police cars are, and we're going to be left with, holy cow, where are we going to fund this from? So that forecast will be great. It'll be very helpful for us and for future councils, actually.
Absolutely.
So it's a great point. With that said, Lisa.
I just had a question. So
I'll get to you. Sorry, Steve.
Point. Steve's been raising his hand.
It's
You're in the
okay.
middle of it.
I got him. It's okay. It's okay. Happens to you all the time.
Yeah, well, that's true. But didn't Pete create that whole spreadsheet so we can see what's happening with all the projects and where they're all at? Isn't that what that was for?
The ones that are in process.
You referring to the SharePoint?
Yeah.
With all of our,
Yeah, a lot of that didn't have
And then
future issues that are going to be coming our way, though. That was stuff that we're dealing with right now. So
yeah, I thought that had to do with our council goals and just
Right.
how we're satisfying those throughout
Right.
the year.
correct.
But that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
future projects
Right.
in
Right.
that. I
We
mean,
could
we've
get a
already
keto Pete
got,
on that right now.
he's already got it built, so I mean, instead of recreating the will, he could possibly add a tab.
Job security, Pete, just look at it like that. Yes, sir. Steve.
What I was gonna mention is we were talking about the monies, like for Hogadon and some of these other things. We wound up basically with the lights that are there now for the night skiing was an external funding source. And I would think, well, and a bunch of the things, some of the interior things that are in the new lodge came from the Friends of Hogadon. So I think that that's one organization that I know about, but I would think that that would be an organization that we could start letting them know that, hey, we're looking for, and I'm sure, there are several of these entities that have their own foundations that raise private funds as well. So I would start putting the word out to these organizations that, hey, these are things that we're seeing on the horizon.
Yeah.
Are you interested in partnering with us and to help start fundraising now for a project 3 years from now, rather than 3 years from now, as has been mentioned? Oh gosh, we need to replace. Where's the money coming from? So I think giving our private partners a heads up on what's coming would be an excellent idea from a PR standpoint.
Well, I think with that idea, we should probably wait until we, as a council, prioritize what those goals are going to be. It reminds me of when Carter and I and Andrew were in front of the SLIB board and they had $150 million worth of asks and only $50 million to give out.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to get down and dirty and start prioritizing things. And then at that point, I think it would be prudent to reach out and say, okay, you're on our radar, can you help or do you want to help?
You bet. So. And some of these things become very critical. Like, when we replaced the lodge, it was either replace the lodge or close. If our lift gets that way, it's either replace it or close. And so these start to become some of the toughies.
Fair enough. Well, and it's tough too because Hogadon had their best year, I think, ever. Snow-wise, it's been
look
fantastic.
at the grin.
Yeah, it's been.
Look at the grin.
And you know what? For us as a council, that's a win. I mean, when we have our facilities are doing fantastic things and breaking records, that's always good. It's always
Win
good.
for Zulema, a loss for Andrew.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
He's retiring soon. He doesn't care. Okay, so anything else on budgeting for grants?
One more and then I'll let us move on.
One more.
Thanks.
Shoot.
Because Carter brought up direct distribution. It sounds, session's over, so it sounds like our allocation for direct distribution is significantly higher than it has been at least the past couple of years.
Yes.
I imagine we're going to hear further about that, but that increase, do you have preliminary thoughts on where that you're going to be recommending we allocate that?
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, excuse me.
Get it right.
Yeah, I'll try. I'm trying. The short answer is yes, and I would like to bring forward some recommendations, probably more consistent with the rest of the budget delivery when we get closer to that point, particularly as it relates to distribution dates and those kinds of things, so that I'm not violating our money on hand policy and those kinds of things. So worst case scenario would be that would be money we would consider for FY25. Best case scenario would be I have some other ideas to bring forward for you to consider that would also invite your ideas as to how we would use that direct distribution funding.
And I'm assuming budgetarily, you're not, you haven't vetted everything yet either. You haven't prioritized
definitely.
where you need to be either. So
Absolutely. We got a lot of work to
That'll
do.
probably play big in it. Go ahead, Steve.
You were asking about the direct distribution. In one of the WHAM blurbs that we got, it actually said how much more money we were going to be getting.
I think it's like 4 million, didn't it?
I believe so, yeah.
I'd say
4 point
three to
something.
4. Yeah.
On top of the 3.5 that we historically got? Or?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, we typically get 4 million roughly that we plug right into the operations. We're anticipating 3 million coming as a part of the governor's budget proposal that the legislature ended up supporting that we could use, from my perspective, for other capital needs.
And that was the breakdown I was talking about, was that extra 26.5.
Yeah, that's for the state. I don't know if it detailed though what City of Casper was going to be getting.
It's in there.
Is it?
Yeah, because it's already, they're using the same Madden whatever formula to allocate it, and it was in one of those emails. Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to excuse you, sir.
All right.
And we will continue on.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. I
Absolutely.
appreciate the conversation.
So
With you.
let's move on to number 6, Poplar and CY intersection lane extension. Mr. Beamer, if you would please, sir.
Mayor, council, evening.
Carter, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Want me to do this? Back in January, you had YDOT present some of their findings at the CY and Poplar intersection, and one of their suggestions was to extend what they referred to as a zipper lane, the southbound lane that merged from two into one immediately south of the intersection, almost at the entrance into the Walgreens parking lot.
Which one did you want?
If you can just zoom out a little bit. I think this is what you see here is the existing configuration.
Yes.
Where it ends rather abruptly south of the intersection into one lane. And their proposal was extend it further south, expand those two lanes further south to allow traffic more time to merge. So if you can go to the very last exhibit, I think, for the very last one. What you see here is the ability for us to do that within the existing roadway geometry. We have to shift the double yellow line that's out there now to the east. That will create one lane going north, two lanes going south. But to accommodate that extra lane, we will have to remove on-street parking. Not a big deal on the west.
Sorry, you share.
What's that?
I just want to share it with.
Oh. Not a big deal on the west side of the street, as this is commercial with existing off-street parking. More of a concern, no doubt, to the residential properties on the east side of the street, of which we counted approximately 16 that would have their on-street parking removed. Now, they do have the ability for parkway parking. That would mean they have to bring it up to standards, right? Hard surfacing. And that right now is at their cost. But it could be extended between 17th and 19th Street and merge before you get to 19th Street into a single lane. And that to me is ample opportunity for that volume of traffic to merge. But again, before we do anything, I would suggest if you guys are in favor of looking at that, we hold a neighborhood meeting and not just include the residential property owners, but also the commercial property owners on the west side of the street and just get some feedback so we can present that back to the council.
Well, Andrew, there's a couple ideas I had because that's my neighborhood I moved out of there, but that if you were to move the yellow line to the east, you could actually extend that 2-lane all the way to 25th rather easily. And very few people park on that street. Very few, if any. And I drive it every day. So I don't think I think where we could get the win is, and I don't know how much money it would cost, we'd have to look at it, but if we're already going to be up there with our machinery, how hard would it be to hard service those parking spots for them along the way? And I don't know that I want to open up a can of worms here, it's just a thought.
That cost is larger than you think. I mean, it's new curb and gutter.
Excuse me.
No doubt, people have got irrigation systems in that way, or they've got trees, mature street trees that we would have to remove. So we have been concentrating on the existing roadway geometry without any hardscaping, any hard capital costs at all, just a matter of paint.
Gotcha.
So what we are proposing right now is rather nominal. In the terms of cost, neighborhood impact a little more substantial. In the fact that, while you say there's not many people that park, the one person that does park goes, I bought this house so I can park in front of my street. And those are very hard arguments to overcome.
Well, I'd much rather have them merging up by 17th than in the intersection and causing accidents. So that seems to me to be a pretty good fix for now. I don't know. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Kyle?
Thanks, Bruce.
I'll get you, Steve.
Thanks, Andrew. I would advocate for a feedback, process. So I'm definitely interested in getting feedback from folks in the neighborhood. The nominal cost that you're referring to, can you ballpark that?
We simply black out the existing double yellow and we paint new yellow.
Couple thousand?
Couple thousand. And we move a couple signs. Very nominal.
Perfect. Steve?
The one thing I would be interested in, is there any way this is more directed to the chief than it is to Andrew, but is there any way that you could wind up seeing how accidents in that stretch change? Do we really wind up reducing accidents, or are we just pushing them farther down the road? Because I've noticed at Outer Drive and Casper Mountain Road, they extended that lane through there, and it's still a racetrack for people trying to be, all they did was extend the racetrack. And that's what I'm wondering, if that's all we're gonna be doing here, and if we're really gonna solve a problem with it all.
Chief?
Mayor, Councilor, absolutely, we track crashes all the time, and we compare them to historical data.
Okay.
You would be able to have feedback as to the betterment of or lack thereof. So remember, the data that we've already provided you did not account for a lot of accidents attributed strictly to the zippering, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So the data is not going to be huge, in my opinion. But I think that the ease with which people will be able to merge will be greatly improved with this. So, if you're looking for miracles, I don't think you're going to get miracles out of this. But absolutely, you will be able to track this from 2 years ago to whatever we end up, and get some time behind us for people to get used to it. Remember, there's always, when we change the roadway, there will always be a counter impact of people learning that. There will be increased crashes until they learn the new roadway.
Sure. But I think we can all agree that it would be better, give them better opportunity in order to merge in that particular section.
Absolutely. It's going to decrease the urgency with which they have to do it. They can buy time to offset each other. Time and distance is going to help that offsetting.
The other thing that's going to help that's never even been talked about is there is an entrance to Walgreens there, but it's right where there's not enough room for two cars to get through there. So that's part of the big problem too. So now folks will be able to go from that right lane into that parking lot, and the left lane will be able to flow better. So we won't have that back up into the intersection of people turning in there. That's never even been discussed, but it'll certainly help. So we are in need of direction requested. I'm assuming you want us to give you the go-ahead to restripe that thing and pull those signs?
Mayor, before we do anything like that, I suggest we actually hold a neighborhood meeting.
Okay.
And we gather some neighborhood input, and then we come back to council to let you know what kind of feedback.
So what does that look? What does that look like then? You'll send us a letter out?
We will send out a letter to all these property owners on the east side and the west side that will be impacted. It goes between mid-block, between 17th and 19th Street. We'll include both sides of the street, and we'll invite them. We'll probably just invite them here to City Hall and have an hour-long meeting or half hour. We probably they can probably convey to us pretty quickly how they feel about this proposal, and we'll bring back their feedback to you.
Okay.
Before I would recommend that we actually just go up there.
Yeah. Very good. So is everybody okay with that course of action?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir. Okay, Municipal Court Committee. So this is my item. I met with the judge. There's a couple problems. Let's see, I have to be, we're public. Her evaluation process, I think 100% of us don't evaluate her because we don't ever see her. We don't interact with her the way we do the city manager and the city attorney. And so with that said, what I would like to do is form what would be called a municipal court committee. We used to have one. For some reason, it's gone away. But this was her proposal. She would like 2 liaisons that would meet once a month with her so that she can discuss what's going on, and with her and Letitia actually, so that she can discuss what's going on in her courtroom, trends she's seeing within the city, things that are working, things that aren't. Administratively, Letitia, if there's something we as a council could do to help support her and the things that they're doing. And so we're going to, I shouldn't say I want to form the committee. I've already formed it. What I need are two volunteers that would be interested in serving on that committee that meets with the judge once a month and then comes back and reports to the council. You'd be interested, Brandy? Anybody else? Steve? Anybody else?
Bruce, I would be.
Okay.
I'm not interested, but I would be curious if we were able to get minutes from those meetings in our info packets or something. I wonder if that.
Well, one of the things that she did say was some of the stuff that she will discuss with the liaisons is not for public consumption. So those would have to be delivered to us in executive session. They're the monthly meetings. And it's not to not be transparent. It's just there are things that she wants to be able to discuss with council through the liaisons concerning things that are happening in her courtroom that she doesn't want to be public knowledge. In other words, if there's a major drug offenses going on or a child pornography ring thereafter, whatever, she does not necessarily want that stuff to be public. Or if she's had a run on people trying to bring weapons into her courtroom. And so there are certain parts of that will probably have to be done in executive session. But we could certainly get an overview, I guess. And I wouldn't even mind appointing 3 of you, and then you guys pick one as a secretary so the 3 of you can get together and kind of come up with a little minute log, and then make a small presentation in executive session every month, and then give us something in our packet that's a little more tangible. That's not. Go ahead.
No, you finished your sentence.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Okay. I was wondering if Eric could weigh in on the mechanism. It sounds like it could get messy to me as to what is available to overview, what is not, and so I'm just wondering if we have any sort of format that you can think of that might make that easier and better for us.
Yeah, Mayor, Council. So I think obviously appointing liaisons to keep under majority or quorum. And then in terms of the discussion, I mean, I can imagine there could be things that are either security in nature or pending investigations that would fall under protection under state statute that wouldn't be public. And so I think probably makes sense to set up a monthly meeting, and to the extent that she identifies those types of things, I mean, you can discuss them privately in that small group, and then I would say let me know, and then we can bring them to the full council in executive session.
So I had initially thought just 2 people, but I'm certainly okay with doing 3.
I raised my hand because nobody else here was.
Okay.
If Michael would like to do it along with Brandy, that's perfectly fine.
Okay. So Mr. Bond, you'd be okay with that?
Absolutely, okay. Sure.
All right, so what I'll do then is we'll appoint you and Brandy, if the council's okay with that. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll get with Renee, and I'll have her get with the judge, and we'll set up a schedule like first Monday of every month, or whatever it's going to be. And I'll have her get with you and Michael and find out what works for you and the judge, and we'll get that set up. And I can tell you she is coming to see us for her quarterly, April 18th, I believe. We will have her here for a work session where she will cover the stuff that's going on with the judge, and then we will also have her in executive session. We'll be going over her evaluation and some of the stuff that happens in her courtroom that can't be public. So we'll be seeing her very soon. And but I wanted to get that appointed tonight because I'd like to get that first meeting in April. So we just need to figure out when that is, and I'll have Renee contact you via email. We'll get that set up. So Floor, can you do that for me? Thank you very much. Coordinate Renee with Brandy and Mike. Thank you. Okay, so that's it for there. Let's move on to agenda review. I don't really have anything. Carter didn't either. I'll be gone next week. Vice Mayor will run the meeting next week. It's a regularly scheduled city council meeting. But during this time, go ahead and look through the agenda. If you have any questions, we could talk about them. I don't know that I can really answer anything without Carter being here when it comes to the agenda. So might just hold those for next week. But we did want to talk about a point that you had brought up about the council leadership process. The question that was asked that you had raised was, do we want to do that in executive session, or do we want to do that in an open public meeting? And there's pros and cons either way, but it's entirely up to the council how you would like to do that.
Sure. I would just advocate that we do that all in open meeting.
Sorry, do what?
The entire election process and the, everybody's record, essentially. So I would advocate that it all be transparent, done in open meeting, and that none of it is taking place in it.
Which is the way we've always done it. It's always been done in a work session.
Are you talking about still having the private ballots, or are you talking about everybody raise their hand for whoever?
I prefer to have a public ballot.
I think that goes against everything in our Constitution.
Yeah,
all the way from top to bottom.
I believe we have to have
private voting.
Private vote when it comes to a straw poll and what do they call that? The actual vote has to be public, but the straw poll I don't believe can be. And I think it also has to have, because we're ranking, and part of it was to protect. Let's say we have 5 people running for one seat. It protects those. Maybe the bottom vote getter or whatever. We just don't. It's not a good idea. And the public will get to see the process. And once the votes are counted by our attorney and our clerk, it's presented in the public like it always has been. So I think that's pretty transparent.
It sounds like Amber's got something to say, and Eric's at the edge of a seat, so I would definitely like to hear what the city attorney has to say. I was thinking along the lines of when Congress votes for Speaker of the House, that's all in public, they're raising their hands, it's all very public who you're voting for. So that's what I had in mind as an.
They are not ranked choice voting.
Correct. Go ahead.
So I'm, just for clarification, I think we already gave direction on this. Are we asking to change the course of direction of what we already gave?
We did give direction on it, but the one thing that we did not decide that needs to be decided, that's where the confusion is whether it was going to be done in executive session or in. The voting's already been decided. It's already a ranked voting. That's already done privately.
Yeah.
What we needed to decide was it done in executive session or was it done? Go ahead, Fleur.
Right, Your Honor. It was decided. We had it down. I think Carter went over it at the very end. And you all said executive session, and there was thumbs for that. But I think Councilor Gamroth just wanted to bring it back up and advocate for that. And we just asked if we could bring it back into this form rather than doing it on the floor because it's hard to change those. It's harder, but we can do it on the floor.
Okay, so we are looking to reconsider the direction.
Kyle asked for a reconsideration. Yes. So that's where the discussion is.
Making sure I didn't miss something.
And to me personally, I don't care how we do it. I think the more transparent, the better. But voting wise, I don't care how we do that either. If everybody wants to do it publicly, whatever. I think it's gonna result in an issue no matter what. If you have more than 2 people running for this seat or for this seat, you could be here all night, just like they do with McCarthy. I mean, how many days and hours did they spend doing that? So, whereas with the process we have, it's pretty well done because it's ranked choice. So, I don't know. Do you have a thought on it, Eric?
Mayor, Council, just to reiterate, so the formal vote has to be in a public session.
Right.
It has to be public. And so when we're talking about the straw poll, that is not something that you're even required by law to have. It is a common practice. It's been a practice at the city for a long time. The statutes do allow deliberation for the appointment to be done in executive session. And when I say allows, it doesn't mandate it. So you do have the discretion whether you want to do the straw poll in the public session, in the executive session. It's purely up to you all. So I just wanted to kind of go over the options that you have. And correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is that historically, it hasn't always been in public. It has potentially, some of that's taken place in exec session, but I don't know the history. So again, lots of flexibility. The main thing is that the formal vote has to be public in an open meeting.
Go ahead. I'll get you, Lisa.
To Councilor Kathy's point, the fact that we do it ranked choice voting, what impact, if any, does that have on it, in your opinion?
So, Mayor, Councilor, so again, ranked choice voting is not specifically, delineated or addressed in statute. And again, it's really ranked choice straw poll, if you will. So it's not official voting, I don't think. So again, I think it's more of an informal process that this council can employ to winnow down the candidates for those 2 positions, retaining some I guess, confidentiality, given that you've got a council of 9 folks and being mindful of the dynamics, then you would do that potentially, that straw poll, confidentially, whether it's ranked choice or not. I don't think legally that makes any difference.
Well, I think one of the reasons, if I remember right, Lisa, go ahead. Let me get to you first.
I was just going to say, I don't think any of the process should be an executive session, and I didn't think so in the beginning of everything. I think that even if we were to keep it in work session and then on the council, but I don't believe any of this should be in work session. We should be able to at least invite the media here to be a part of it and then be on YouTube. So
sure, I'm okay with that. I think executive session came up because we were talking about every other year we would be inviting the new 3 members that had been elected to be able to come in and make their pitch if they chose that they wanted to run for leadership. And that, it doesn't bother me if it's all public. I think the vote, the straw vote that we fill out should be done the way it's always been done, and I think it goes back there and gets counted by our attorney. I don't like the idea of doing the straw poll publicly only because it reminds me of the kid on the playground that gets picked last. I just don't like that idea. I don't like what it sets up. I don't like the way it makes people feel. Me personally, I don't care. I've got pretty thick skin, but not everybody does. And so I don't know. That's up to you guys. It's a council vote. It's a council decision to make. And I've said my piece, and you guys are welcome to weigh in however you want, and we'll do whatever the council decides, for sure. So go ahead.
I guess the only thing that I would say, I'm happy with what we've discussed so far. I'm very happy to do the discussion in a work session. I don't mind how we are voting currently. I don't think the entire content of the ballot for every individual needs to be made public. And the only reason I say that is because historically, once the vote is done, everybody is able to then come to a consensus around the leadership that we've chosen, which I think is a healthy thing, right? We have a debate, we discuss, we come to some sort of determination, and then everybody is able to move forward with whatever leadership has been chosen. And I feel like if by making every individual's ballot public, we could run into a situation where that continuity, that cohesion is not able to gel in the same way.
That
would be my only concern with doing it. It's not because I don't want people. I had folks call me and ask me who I voted for mayor, and I told them I don't. That doesn't bother me, but I do feel like it could cause issue with post-election cohesion. If people don't share that concern, I'm not adamantly opposed to it all being public, but that is my only concern with making the very fine details of exactly who voted for exactly who in which order as something that becomes public, because at that point it doesn't matter who I voted for first, second, and third, right? The leadership is a leadership, and we're moving forward together. So.
Well, I think when you're casting a vote, when you go anywhere to cast a vote, you get to do that in privacy. You get to pick who you want and what order you want them in, and that could be your choice to make. And I think that's fair. And I think if you want to tell people how you voted, you can. Go ahead.
So let me just clarify my point. So I just meant the straw poll fine with Spluer and the attorney doing the count. So to me, that's fine. I just didn't think that we should be secluding anything into the executive session. So much more similar to what we've been doing in the past.
And I think we did agree last time, if I'm recollecting, that whoever is nominated for those posts and accepts those then gets 5 minutes to give their pitch to the council, and that'll all be done publicly. So go ahead.
I think the question was, though, if we take that straw poll in work session and it gets counted in there during work session, are those ballots then part of work session, or is that
they're executive because they go into a safe in a folder and they're kept forever. Is that not true?
Taken here and they're done here. I'm not sure that they are.
Your Honor, no. If we do it in public in a work session, and those ballots, that's why we had to release the results last time. So that's how it came about, whether we should do it in exec session so that we wouldn't have to release the results. So like you said, everything would be done in public. You do their 5 minutes, and then you just go into it just to do the straw poll.
And I think that's fair.
And so, Mayor and Councilor, I agree with that, and that was going to be my point. If you do the straw poll itself, in a public session, whether it's a work session or a regular meeting, I think they would be subject to a public records request. Now, if you do that, just the straw poll in the executive session, I would be comfortable arguing that those are privileged deliberations regarding the appointment of somebody to that position. And because it was an executive session, they're not public records, so at least we have a callable argument to keep them out of the press. But again, either way is your call.
Yes, ma'am. Mike, do you have a question? Mr. Bond?
Not a question, but basically what Eric just said was kind of my point about, the deliberations and the nomination process. That I see that appropriate for, work session and or executive session, because it's deliberation of, kind of a personnel issue. So maybe that's in our policy, we just want to define, okay, deliberations and nominations happen here, this way, frank choice voting, so forth. That's the nomination process. Then the public meeting is where the actual voting takes place.
Right, but the counting of the straw poll votes with the city clerk and the city attorney
right.
could be done in executive session. Is that
yes?
Everybody okay
yes.
with that? Kyle?
I would actually advocate that the ballots be counted in open session, not in executive session. I don't think we need to be making a big production out of it, because I agree that, you got to take human emotions and stuff, there's a dynamic there, but I'm more comfortable with it being done in open meeting, and if somebody wants more information, they can submit a public records request. I want it to be available to the people that care enough to search for it, but I don't necessarily think we need to make a big production about it and tell everyone how you voted all three ways, because that could lead to some interpersonal conflict. But I do think if somebody wants access to the information, they should have it.
Well, what you've said is a bit of an X, and the reason I say that is it's crossing paths, because if we do it the way you say, that is a public record now. And I can promise you it's going to get out. Everybody's going to know how you voted, how you ranked. Go ahead.
Okay, let's just dumb it down for me here. What we're arguing about now is...
We're not arguing.
conversing at very length. My first vote here, so hear me out. They take in our little pieces of paper, they count them. Somebody was mad, so then we got the email and everybody got to know who got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 votes total. None of our names are on it, so it's still anonymous voting, constitutional-wise.
No.
There were guesses.
There were names on it.
I didn't write my name on my vote.
I don't think it is not public how any of us voted.
So we got the total counts, but our names weren't on it. So
No,
we
just
still
the
have
name of the
sequence.
people that were on there. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So we are now discussing at length whether or not that little piece of paper that went into an email that everyone got to see is ruining our lives. Just like I said, this is what I'm hearing.
You know, it's
Do we
actually-
want to release the numbers at the end when
We can,
someone
because
asks
nobody's
for
going
it
to know who voted
or
what. Our names aren't on the ballot, so you're absolutely
Right,
correct.
so like this is the most tedious thing I've heard in a hot minute. You guys, I love you to death, but.
No, you're correct.
Executive
not on the
means the
ballot.
email never happened. Work session means the email may happen if somebody asks who voted.
And it wouldn't matter because nobody's name's on their ballot, so they're not going to know how you voted anyway.
People aren't stupid.
You can figure
figure it
I
out.
think you
I
could
mean,
too.
Steve figured it out, and maybe feelings were hurt or not, but you're also a very grown, mature man, and I think he did fine. So I feel like this is
It's up to you
painful.
guys. It's up to you guys. We just have to make a decision one way or the other. All we're doing is bouncing ideas, so a decision needs to be made. Somebody can bring a proposal. If you get the thumbs, we're good to go. So we have two proposals on the table. One is public from the get-go to the end, period. The other is public until the straw poll is counted, and that would be done in executive session where those ballots are protected. That's it. Those are your two proposals. So everything's public in that one also, other than the actual count of the ballots. And then it would be public on who got the seats.
so the same way we did it this
Same
year.
way we did it last time,
I'll
correct.
propose that.
And I guess my concern is, we all don't seem to care. However, this is setting up policy for future councils as well.
Correct.
And I don't know how those people are going to feel about voting being public.
Then they can
That's what-
change it.
Do what?
Make them go through this to change it.
How about I propose this and let's see where it goes. How about we do it the way we've always done it. Everything's public, including the presentation for the people that are running, but the votes themselves will be counted in executive session with Fleur and the city attorney, and the winner will be announced at that point. Yes?
I would just modify to say cast and counted
Cast and counted.
in executive session.
Yep,
And I guess my question,
that is a majority. That's a majority. But you can ask a question if you choose.
well, we seem to be running on the assumption that there's some expectation of anonymity, and I'm curious from the city attorney if there is anything. I know that when we as an individual go to cast our ballots during a midterm or a regular election, there's an expectation of anonymity, but us as council representatives picking our leadership, I don't know if we have the same protections or if we should even.
Mayor, council, I think it's up to this body how it chooses to do it. I think it's at least contemplated that some level of privateness, if you will, or anonymity would be available due to the fact that you can have these conversations in an executive session outside of the public spotlight. So again, I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer to any of this. I think it's, again, whatever the council decides in terms of anonymity between amongst counselors, that's, again, it's not necessarily spelled out. I don't think there's the same constitutional issues as you would have as an individual that's going to cast a ballot at a general election, right? I mean, that's embedded within the Wyoming and federal constitutions that it's an anonymous ballot. So I guess strictly legally speaking, there aren't the same legal protections, but there is some nod to some private deliberations.
Okay, so Fleur, if I understand this correctly, what we just got thumbs up on is everything will be public except for the ballots. And those will be done between you and the city attorney in executive session, and then you can announce who your next leadership will be.
That's what I have down.
Okay.
Thank you. And I recognize that we have a majority on that, but I would still like to be on the record that I am still a no vote on it.
Fair enough.
Thanks.
So it passed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 1. Okay.
You forgot to count.
Oh, Mr. Bond, were you in favor of the, I apologize. Michael, can you hear me? Well, no, just for the record, if there's more than.
Yeah, I did thumbs up.
Okay,
Yeah, I
okay,
did
so
thumbs up.
7 to 1. Okay, very good, sir, thank you. So we will move on from there. Agenda review, did anybody have anything concerning the agenda that we needed to, that was part of that? No? Okay. I'm sorry, go
Just
ahead.
one observation. Sorry, it's a night, I guess. I feel like talking a lot. The top three on the very back page, future agenda items, those top three have been on there since I've been on council, I think. And so I just wonder if we haven't addressed them in 2 years, should we save the ink and just move them?
We did just form an additional advisory committee today.
Okay, I think I think the reason that got put on there was because I brought up the fact that the Cheyenne City Council created a tech advisory committee. I think that's when that originally got on there. And I am not interested in exploring that further at this time. And so if that's what it was hinging on, I would advocate that we remove it.
Okay, let's, if it's okay with you, let's talk to Carter about those, because I know the excessive vehicle storage was something code enforcement was working on. I don't know where they're at with that now.
It's been on there a long time.
It has been. Liz, can you speak to it, or?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I know that the chief is also working on this, because again, depending on where the vehicles are stored, if they're in the lot, and there was a lot identified, and I thought Councilor Ingebretson identified a lot that we were looking at over on Mitchell, that had the excessive vehicles that were getting moved.
There's also one on McKinley too.
Yes, sir, there is. So it was, we've not done a lot with it, but if you all want to prioritize that, it's going to have to be a partnership between Code and PD.
Would you put on our pre-meeting floor next week to talk about these 3 items, and maybe we can get some feedback from Carter and see, it'd probably take about 5 minutes, I suppose, and we'll see where we're at with those. Thank you, Kyle. Anything else for anybody on the agenda review? Ma'am?
Just wanted to point out, we are suggesting that the April 11th meeting start at 4 p.m. Just want to start start a little early. Journey is that night. There are many people who will be going to that.
Correct,
So-
and we also canceled the executive session for that night. That's why the judge is coming on the 18th, so that the folks that want to go to the concert can go. I tried to bail out for the concert and have Eric run the meeting because he's got tickets too, but I didn't think that was overly fair, so.
Supporting Ford Wyoming Center.
Yeah, so is everybody okay with 4 o'clock on the 11th?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead and mark that down now, and then we'll just do that. That should get us out of here in plenty of time. Thank you, Fleur. Legislative review, Jolene, do you have anything to bring us?
Mayor, I do not.
Okay, thank you. The direct distribution we heard about is a plus for us, so we got lucky there. Let's do council around the table. Mr. Bond, I'll start with you.
I don't have anything.
Okay, thank you for being able to appear tonight. I appreciate it. Councilor Kathy?
Oh,
Well, he's got a-
at home. The biggie was P&Z Thursday night. The group that's putting the sports complex at the
Wyoming Sports Ranch? Wyoming Sports Ranch?
Thank you. The Wyoming Sports Ranch was there, and they got approved and thumbs up, so that will be coming to council for a final vote to proceed with that. There'll be a couple other things, but that was the biggie of the P&Z meeting.
Excellent. Randy?
I have Health Department this Thursday, just joined a new committee, so I'll have more things to talk about. I believe Home and Garden Show is this weekend, state basketball. Kelly Walsh took 6th for the girls. They're the only ones in Casper that represented us, so
Nice.
yay, Lady Trojans. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Amber?
I attended the Amico Reuse Agreement Joint Powers Board meeting. I don't really have a major update for you there other than that Clubhouse project is underway. Should be a hole in the ground at this point. And we heard nothing from the contractor there, so
Wow,
3 crowns.
very cool.
That's what I got.
Lisa?
There's a post-legislative report coming through the chamber, and so, which I'm going to attend, which I recommend everybody doing. And then I attended the science zone yesterday and did a tour and walked through the whole facility, so I'm looking forward to seeing what they're gonna bring forward.
Lisa, when's that legislative update from the chamber?
It's April 6th.
And you have to register.
Let Renee know and she'll sign you up.
Thanks.
Cool. Jenna? Jenna Jensen?
Yes, I got a couple things. I also attended the Science Zone, the same thing as Lisa, did a little walk around. Let's see, Happy Pi Day.
Yes, 3.14. Absolutely.
You know, that's important.
1579.
9999999.
And then also, it was nice that the city's Historic Preservation Committee came up and toured the National Historic Trails Interpretive Center. So it was nice to have them folks up there and see what we're doing.
Very cool.
That's about all I got.
Thank you. Mr. Gamroth?
Thanks, Bruce. Had a DDA board meeting last Wednesday. We're going to be doing some strategic planning this year. It's been like 10 years since it was done, so very overdue. We also have some board terms coming up in June, I believe 3 of them. So anyone that is interested in joining the DDA board, please start putting your resume together and be ready to apply for those board terms. We got approval, or we gave approval as the board to relocate their offices to the Mineral Resource Building. So they'll be on the same building with Advanced Casper and Visit Casper. That'll save the DDA about $20,000 a year in rent. So for people that run on a shoestring budget, that is definitely worth it to them. And we've also talked about ice skating plans for the next year. Obviously, we heard from the community. The ice rink is a big part of David Street, and so talking about the benefits of raising money to purchase new or potentially taking advantage of some opportunities to get used equipment, just weighing those pros and cons and trying to make the best decision moving forward. I wanted to thank the Vice Mayor, Ray, for the invitation to the SIM, or Sequential Intercept Model meeting that they had last Thursday. Really good group of people working in social services. Definitely one of those groups that feels like they are working to get things done. And so I appreciated the invite, and I'll try to sit on that when I can. Like I said earlier tonight, I went to the DCBA meeting last Thursday that they hosted in regards to homelessness. There were about 15 downtown businesses represented there. I already covered it, but, they got lots of issues that they're dealing with. Homeless people using their bathrooms for hygiene purposes and, showering. Just the altercations that they're finding themselves in. My wife works downtown, and last week they had a gentleman just go to multiple shops just shoving stuff in his coat. And so we talked about some opportunities for collaboration between business owners. Apparently on the east side of town, the big stores, Home Depot, Menards, Walmart, Target, those guys all share with each other pictures of individuals that have been trespassed and individuals that are known for burglary and stuff. And so that works really well for them to share those pictures around so all their staff can be educated and informed on who they need to be looking out for. So it sounds like downtown business owners are going to start putting together that email list and putting together those channels of communication so that they're sharing that with each other. It was also driven home by Captain Dabney, the importance of those folks calling. Anytime there's any sort of criminal element going on downtown, please call the police department, even if you have past experiences of them not responding in maybe the most timely manner or, not getting there as quickly as they would have liked. We need those calls to document what's going on downtown so that we can have data points that we can use as reference as we're, putting together trends over time and stuff. So please call the police department if there's any sort of criminal behavior going on downtown. Not just if someone looks homeless, that's not something the police department can act on, but if there's burglary, vandalism, public urination, anything like that, please call the police department so that we can get those data points. Other than that, we have a Metro Task Force meeting tomorrow, Councilor Pollack and I, and then there's a Casper Housing Authority board meeting Thursday. So I'll report back on that next week. That's all I got.
Thank you. I just have a couple things. Went to, Mr. Cathy joined me, and we went to the police promotion ceremony on Friday night. We have a new lieutenant and captain. So it's always a pleasure to go and be amongst.
Sergeant, wasn't it?
Lieutenant and Sergeant.
Lieutenant and Sergeant, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be part of that and see that. Floor's always at them as well. And I went to one, probably a month ago or so. So those are nice, and they really appreciate when we show up to those. I got a Boys and Girls Club essay contest coming up on the 11th, I think. It's a Sunday. Anyway, so if anybody's interested in going and supporting these young kids and their essays, reach out to me and I'll make sure we get you a seat at the table. Wyoming Sports Ranch, now that they are WYO Sports Ranch, they're going to actually be breaking ground before CNFR. So they're going to take, they're going to take 2 of those parking lots away, but the city's doing a great job of making new parking available for them up above. To try to facilitate all that. And then once that building's done, they have promised not to do anything the week of CNFR, and they're going to open up their big hall for the exhibitions and things like that. So it's going to be a huge win for our community all the way around. I will miss as I'm going to be out of town, I will miss the Joint Powers Water Board meeting. So hopefully you and Amber can. I'll be there. Awesome. And I appreciate Michael and Brandy volunteering, and Steve, thank you, for the municipal committee. That's going to be really important for the entire council so that we at least have an idea of where we're at and we'll be able to evaluate her better. She also said we are welcome in her courtroom anytime if you just want to go observe, and she'd love to meet everybody and as often as you like. We'll see her again on the 18th. I want to thank our department heads for coming tonight. And getting the budget process started. We got to start somewhere. We've got some really hard things to think of, which made me think of the Science Zone. Keep in mind when it comes time to delve out the money to our nonprofits that we have to make sure that it fits within our council goals. And, are they doing things for the community, for the mental health and the things that we outlined? So that's going to help narrow our resources down quite a bit for us and make it a little easier anyway. That's all I have. Next Tuesday is a regularly scheduled city council meeting that Ray will be here to run, and that's all I have. Enjoy spring break. I'll see you folks in April.
Brandy, can I ask?
Sure, I got a chin lift.
Oh, you did? Seriously?
Yes.
Nice.
Been on my bucket list for a minute, and we just got a new plastic surgeon that